Story 1. My daughter lied once. I believed her and kicked my son out. 2 years later, she needs his kidney, but he refuses to save her. I never imagined I'd write something like this, or that I'd be sitting here alone, my hands shaking, revisiting every decision I made that night, every word I screamed, and every quiet I chose to maintain. I was 38, and my spouse was 39. We had 2 children, Adrian, 18, and Isabella, 9. Despite the significant age disparity, I always assumed they loved each other, looked after each other, and were close siblings. Adrian was quiet and reserved. He enjoyed reading, staying in his room, and studying. Yet he was a good lad. He never responded to me, never caused difficulty, and never gave me any reason to distrust him. Isabella was the complete opposite. Cheerful, active, a whirlwind, constantly moving and talking. And because I worked part-time and my husband spent long hours away, Adrian frequently looked after her. He would return home from college and be with her until I arrived. There were no indicators. Until that night. It was a family meal. We'd prepared spaghetti. My sister-in-law provided the wine. My nephews were playing in the living room. My husband, my children, and I were all at the table along with a couple of cousins. Nothing unusual, nothing out of the ordinary. And then Isabella spoke it plainly, without drama or tears, like if the neighbor's dog had bitten her. Adrian touched me down there, she said simply and coldly, as if she didn't realize the gravity of the situation. Everything ceased. My cousin quit speaking. My spouse stared at me. I gazed at my kid. What did you say, my love? I asked softly, trying not to shake. My brother touched my private parts twice. I coughed on my own breath. Nobody said anything for a few seconds. Then my hubby got up. His chair tipped backward. I followed him as if my legs were moving themselves. I called Adrian. He didn't respond. I called again. This time he picked up. What's wrong, Mom? Come home now. What happened? Just come home. He got off the line. Took him 20 minutes to arrive. He stepped in with his knapsack on his shoulder, perplexed. What happened? Before he could respond, my husband pushed him hard against the wall. Did you touch her? Did you touch your sister? What? What are you talking about? Adrian couldn't grasp it. I swear it. I could see it on his face. He was pale, terrified, stammering, and shaking his head. No, of course not. I would never do that. I don't know why she's saying that. But my husband wouldn't let him go on. He punched him in the face. Adrian collapsed to the floor, bleeding from his nose, and looked up at us with a mixture of terror, amazement, and something more. Something I'd never seen before in him. Betrayal. I did nothing. I simply gazed at him. I did not hug him. I did not defend him. I did not believe him. My husband went to his room and got his backpack, clothes, and paperwork. He went outside, flung everything on the doorstep, and screamed, "You're dead to us. Never come back." Adrian was crying, practically begging. He said he didn't comprehend and it wasn't true. Please don't kick me out. And I simply stood there clutching Isabella. No word, not a single one. We excluded him from everything. We changed the locks and canceled his college support. He never returned to that house or made another call. He ceased to exist for us. We spent weeks convincing ourselves that we had done the right thing by sheltering our baby. We questioned her multiple times if there was anything more that had happened. She only said no twice, and we never took her to a psychologist because we thought our love was enough and we blindly believed her. For a while, it appeared that peace was returning. Isabella played, smiled, and slept better. I started sleeping too until the dream started. I would see Adrian on the floor, his face bleeding, his eyes wide, gazing at me, his mother, and asking why. Because I didn't inquire. I didn't doubt. I simply acted. That was the night I completely destroyed him. Months have passed since we kicked Adrian out. Months of silence, denial, and thinking we'd done the right thing. Isabella smiled again, playing. She even mentioned that she felt safer today. I viewed that as a sign that we had acted appropriately. My husband never brought up Adrian's name again. Whether I indicated that I missed him or inquired whether we knew anything about him, his expression would freeze me from the inside. Adrian didn't exist for him anymore. Until that Saturday. Isabella was on her way to art class. An elder cousin was driving her. It was a calm afternoon. I was folding laundry when the phone rang. I don't recall much of the call. Only a few words remain in my ear. Accident, head-on collision, ambulance, 1 person killed. The girl is in critical condition. My husband followed me as I hurried to the hospital. We arrived as she was being brought to the ER. There was blood. There were shrieks. Doctors were scurrying everywhere. I saw her pale, unconscious little face covered in tubes. For a little moment, the world fell silent again. My niece was killed in the impact. Isabella lived, but only barely. The diagnosis was straightforward. Serious damage to her left kidney, several internal hemorrhages, and contusions. She would require immediate surgery, most likely a transplant. The physicians advised us that time was of the essence and that we should be prepared for the worst. We spent days in the ICU. I never left her side, sleeping on a chair and refusing to eat. I simply stared at the machines that kept her alive. My husband became a statue. He didn't speak or cry. He was simply there. One night, Isabella opened her eyes. She was weak. She couldn't speak clearly, but she recognized me. She gave me a small grin and asked, "Mom, do you think there is a heaven?" My throat tightened. "Yes, my love, of course there is. And do you think bad people can go there if they're sorry?" "Why do you ask that, sweetheart?" She took a break. Her gaze grew far away. "Because I did something very bad. Something exceedingly awful." I felt my stomach drop. "A few months ago, I lied to you. I lied about Adrian." I didn't speak. "What? What did you lie about?" "I made it up, Mom. The part about him touching me, it wasn't true. I was just angry because he wouldn't let me use his tablet. I wanted to punish him. I thought if I said something, I don't know. I didn't think all of that would happen. Then I became afraid and didn't know how to convey the truth." Her eyes flooded with tears. Mine had already overflowed. "I killed my brother," she replied, sobbing. "And now I'm going to die too." I clutched her as if I might draw her soul into mine. "Don't say that. You're not going to die. Forgive you. I'm right here with you." But inside, a fracture was tearing me apart. Not for her, but for him, Adrian. For his expression on the floor and his quiet that night. I returned home. I dragged myself like a dying beast. I told my hubby everything. He was calm. He didn't say anything for several minutes. Finally, without looking at me, he murmured, "We're not going to judge her. What's done is done," and walked away. His apathy hurt me more than his fist that night, but I couldn't take the stillness any longer. In the early hours of the morning, I looked for Adrian. His phone number was disconnected. I found him after searching social media platforms. A profile image without a face indicated a semi-abandoned account. I emailed him, "Hi, it's me. Please just read this." He did not respond. I waited 1 day, 2. On the 3rd day, I sent an additional message, long and painful. I informed him about the accident, Isabella, and the confession. I told him I wasn't expecting him to forgive me. I just wanted him to know Mom wanted to see him, that she didn't have much time, and that we weren't asking for anything else. Hours later, a response. "You all hurt me too much. I don't know if I can forgive, but if she's as bad as you say, I'll go one last time." My hands trembled as I texted him the hospital location. I heard nothing else for 3 days. I was in the hallway when I noticed him. Adrian is leaner, has dark circles under his eyes, and wears basic clothing. He walked as if he were carrying the weight of the world upon his shoulders. My heart desired to run to him. My body did not move. I watched him enter the room. She spotted him. He stared at her and time stood still. Isabella burst out in tears. "I'm sorry. Please, I ruined you." Adrian listened quietly. "I can't forgive you completely," he finally replied. "But a part of me already has." He grasped her hand, spoke to her for a few minutes, and then went. He did not greet or glance at me. He only left one sentence before going away. If there's a funeral, I'll be there, but don't expect anything else. He didn't say anything else after that. Do not anticipate anything else. Adrian vanished again. No message, no reaction, only the echo of his voice in that room, in Isabella's cries, repeating her apology again and over as if asking for forgiveness was sufficient. But I couldn't sleep now that I knew. I knew time was running out, and the only person who could save my daughter was the same one I had assisted in destroying. A week after his visit, the doctor confirmed it. She's going to need a transplant soon. My spouse and I had compatibility tests. We weren't compatible, neither of us. The risk of rejection was exceedingly high. The doctor was direct. A biological brother is the best option. If he's a match, the chances are much higher. I'd already known. I'd seen it in the medical records. They have the same blood type, O positive. Even though I knew I had no right, I looked for him again. I wrote to him from a number he didn't recognize. I just said, "It's important. Please, we need to talk." To my amazement, he consented. We met in a small, remote coffee shop. He was on time. He strolled in alone without looking at anyone. He was wearing the same modest clothes and carrying a rucksack on his shoulder. However, his eyes were different. They were no longer the eyes of a hurt youngster, but of someone who had learned to accept the emptiness. He sat across from us. My hubby was beside me. Nobody talked for several seconds. He interrupted the stillness. "What do you want?" I gulped hard. My voice quivered. "Adrian, we checked the test. There's a high chance you're a match for Isabella. The doctor says if you get tested, you could save her." He wasn't responding. He expressed no rage or astonishment, only fatigue. "You're asking me to donate to my sister." "Yes, I told you." My husband intervened. "We know this doesn't erase the past, but it could be the first step to fixing things, to becoming a family again." Adrian raised his eyebrows. He then gazed at us with surgical coldness. "Becoming a family again?" I asked, choking back tears. "We're not asking you to forgive us, just to help her. She's dying." Then he smiled. However, it was not a cheerful smile. It was a sad, sardonic, and perplexing smirk. "And you think this fixes everything?" my spouse asked, winking. "It's not for us. It's for her." Her? The same one who said I touched her? The one who watched me sleep on the street and didn't lift a finger? The one who only said she was sorry when she realized she might die? I tried to interrupt. "Adrian, please. Do you know how many times I thought about dying?" he asked. "How many nights I slept clutching my backpack? How many times I didn't eat for 2 days because I didn't have a single coin?" He looked at us but didn't notice us. He was speaking to his recollections. I was about to throw myself off a bridge. Not once but 3 times. And you know why I didn't? Because I told myself, if I survive this, then I'm going to live my way without owing anything to anyone. He took his place. And now you come to ask me to cut myself in 2 to give a part of myself to save you. My husband stood up as well, this time with his fists tightened. "Your sister is dying. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" Adrian asked, his expression mixed with wrath and pity. "You know what it means to me? That now it turns out I'm worth something. That now you need me. That now you want to listen to me." I was shaking with joy. "Just think about it, please. If not for her, then for yourself. So you can get closure on this." He was grumbling. "I've already got closure. I received it the night I slept on the street with a bloodied face while you celebrated Christmas without me." He then left. He did not shout, cry, or disrespect us. He just departed. That was the last time I saw him. I did not sleep that night. My husband paced the living room like a caged lion, muttering words like ungrateful and selfish. What kind of brother does that? I heard him, but I didn't disagree because one phrase kept replaying in my head. She is dying and he can save her. I felt useless, empty, and increasingly desperate. So I did the unthinkable. I opened Facebook. I shared a photo of Isabella in the hospital. Tubes, dark circles, her little face sleepy, delicate, on the verge of death. I wrote a lengthy, honest yet twisted text. I informed them that we needed a donor, that her brother was a match, that we had already apologized, that the girl had sought forgiveness, and that he was the only thing missing. I tagged him using his full name and concluded with a condemnatory sentence. What kind of monster refuses to save his sister when he has the power to do so? First there was silence. Then the post blew up. Dozens of reactions, hundreds of comments, initially from acquaintances, then relatives, and finally from complete strangers. Everyone held an opinion. Everyone pointed fingers. Everyone judged. Seriously, he's going to let a little girl die? A kidney? Just one kidney. You can live with one. After everything she suffered, it's the least he could do. What kind of human trash? A life for a life. It makes up for the damage. Some people went even further. A monster disguised as a victim. Anyone with a heart would donate without thinking. Maybe he did what the girl said, and that's why he doesn't want to help. That one hurt more than I expected because, despite knowing Adrian was innocent, I had made him the target again. I had unleashed a digital mob. But in my mind, I kept thinking the same thing. If he feels forced, he might say yes. Several hours passed. I reloaded the post every 5 minutes, waited and checked his profile. Nothing. Until about 4 hours later, he responded. Instead of a remark or a private message, he sent a video. He shared a roughly 5-minute video on his profile, and it received hundreds of reactions in less than an hour. It began with him sitting on a bench, an empty park in the background, plain clothes, untidy hair, and deep dark circles, yet with an expression I couldn't recognize. He started, "Hello, my name is Adrian. Many of you know me because of what my mother posted today. Some of you knew me before, others only from what you've read. I want to tell you something I never had the chance to say." He paused, took a long breath. 2 years ago, my sister accused me of touching her in front of my entire family, and without asking me or listening to me, they beat me, threw me out, and took everything from me. I was 18 years old at the time, and my world collapsed. I slept on the street, went hungry, lost my scholarship, had no one to call, slept in libraries, hid in public restrooms to wash myself, and considered suicide several times. He then presented a recording from his phone. It was a talk with Isabella in the hospital. Her crying, confessing, pleading for his pardon, claiming she made it all up, that she had wrecked him, and that she did not deserve his forgiveness. Then he looked back at the camera. I saved this recording not for revenge, but because I knew that one day someone would try to turn me into the villain again. He took a break. His voice cracked. I do not wish for my sister to die, ever. But I will not save the people who killed me while I was still alive. I will not give them a piece of my body as a currency for their redemption. I am not their second chance. He ended with a heartbreaking sentence. I am not a monster. I just learned to say no. And this time, I am the one breaking the silence. He stopped the video and I stood there stunned, my phone in my hand. The notifications began coming in, but now the comments were intended for US. What kind of mother allows that? You are the real monsters. She lies, you attack, and he's supposed to save you? Disgusting. I hope you live with that guilt for the rest of your lives. The private messages were terrible. My sister has blocked me. My folks called me and cried. My sister-in-law wrote to say she hoped the same thing happened to me. Isabella saw the video. She saw everything. I discovered her crying alone in her bed. Everyone hates me, she said. Everyone, even him. I didn't know how to respond. I just hugged her, but I'm not sure if it was out of love or remorse. The video has gone viral. In less than 24 hours, Adrian's post was shared on Facebook groups, Reddit, TikTok accounts that collected family confessions, and even Twitter threads arguing whether he should give the kidney. It wasn't only our narrative anymore. Now everyone had an opinion. The majority supported him. Some argue that forgiveness does not force you to sacrifice yourself. Others replied, a kidney doesn't pay for a ruined life. And many simply said, what I couldn't ignore, they deserve it. Isabella, who had before been just another victim in a hospital, was now viewed as a manipulator and liar. The phrase false accuser began emerging in the comments. One that cut me like a dagger was, "Let her die just as she almost killed her brother." I had to erase the message, but it was too late. The damage had been done. But Adrian was not finished. A day after the first video, he posted another. This time, he wasn't speaking in the park. He was sitting at a table holding a piece of paper in his hand. I've received a lot of questions, and the most common one is, "Why can't you just forgive?" I'm going to try to explain it without anesthesia. His voice was calm, tired, and precise. I was accused of child abuse. There was no trial or proof, just a phrase shouted aloud, and that was enough. I lost my house, my schooling, and my name. I became a pariah, and no one wanted to be near me. Have you ever attempted to rent a room with the rumor that you abused someone? Have you ever tried to find work with a stain you can't erase? Even if it's a lie. He held up a document. His medical records from a year ago show that he was treated for suicidal ideation, severe depression, and starvation. The first time I slept under a bridge, it was raining. The second night, I thought about swallowing all the pills I had. The third, someone spat on me in the street. He yelled, "Child abuser," at me, and I had no one to call. He put the document on the table. "I don't need you to understand me. I just need you to listen. I don't want revenge. I do not wish for my sister's death, but I will not offer myself up as a martyr for a family that buried me alive." He picked up a photograph. It was of him and Isabella when she was a small child. They were smiling. His hand was shaky. I loved her. She was my sister. I made her breakfast, changed her clothes, waited for her after school. And when she said what she said, she didn't just destroy my life. She destroyed me. He tore the photograph in half. He remained silent for a few seconds. "My kidney is not a currency of redemption. I am not the cure for anyone's guilt. I will not donate and I will not apologize for it." He ended the video with a line that felt like a bullet. "If you look for me at the funeral, I'll be in the back. Not to comfort, but to watch what you built and left to die." He put the camera away. I vomited after seeing it. That is not a metaphor. I practically vomited in the hospital bathroom from terror, remorse, and the fact that I could no longer hide. When I returned to the room, Isabella was awake. Her eyes were inflamed. She didn't say anything, only said, "Does he hate me?" I didn't know what to reply because I had no idea how he felt, only what I had done and what was coming. The doctors informed us that her condition was deteriorating, that the days were numbered, that there was no longer time to wait for regular donors, and that Adrian remained the most compatible candidate. But he had already mentioned that there would be no donations. That night, my spouse burst. "Damn selfish, ungrateful bastard. Let him rot wherever he is." I tried to calm him down, telling him that cursing would not help. "And what do you expect me to do? Applaud him for letting his sister die?" He isolated himself in the kitchen and smashed a dish. I sat alone in solitude. I grieved as I glanced at images on my phone of them as children when they were innocent. I cried like I never had before because I knew Isabella was going to die. And it wasn't due to a shortage of kidneys. It was for something far worse. A family's refusal to listen, believe, and love unreservedly. The room smelled like disinfectant and sadness. Isabella was unconscious and linked to more machinery than her body. Her skin was nearly translucent. Every time the alarm went off, I held my breath. The doctor would come in, check, change something, and depart with the same expression. Containment, not solution, only waiting. The donation list was not moving. The compatibilities were minor. The chances are nearly negligible, and Adrian was gone. After his second video, he vanished entirely, deleting his social media accounts, changing his phone number, leaving no trace. Nobody knew where he was. And to be honest, I wasn't sure I wanted him found. Not for his sake, but because I was concerned about what my husband would do if he ever saw him again. The days passed like sluggish blades. The hateful messages were no longer visible. They were now private. Some wrote to wish me strength. Others would tell me I deserved every moment of pain. A woman I didn't know sent me a message. "Proud of yourself now? You raised a daughter who lied and a son you destroyed." I hung up the phone. I did not switch it on again. One morning in the early hours, the doctor summoned us. The sentence was direct. Prepare yourselves. She's no longer responding. It's just a matter of waiting for the moment. I walked out into the hallway. I slid from the wall to the floor. I did not cry. I just hugged my knees. My hubby didn't say anything. He was pale and shocked. He was not the same person who had beaten his son that night. He was a broken statue, waiting to be crushed totally. I returned to the room. I grasped Isabella's hand and whispered, "I'm here, my love. Mommy's here." There was no response, just a continuous beep from the cardiac monitor. I closed my eyes and prayed for the first time, not to a god, not for a miracle. I asked for time, just a little more, just a bit more. And a day later, we got a letter with no return address. There is no name, only a sheet of paper folded in three. Came from Adrian. Don't search for me. I'm not going to change my mind. I don't want her to die, but I won't take part in a forced redemption play. Isabella lied and you believed her. I was sentenced without a trial, and all I wanted was to be heard, which no one granted. So don't ask me to give you my body now. You've already taken my soul. They believe death redeems, but I died 2 years ago. Her end is not my fault. It is an echo of her origin. I hope you find peace, but don't search for it in me. There was no signature, only a photo of him smiling from years ago when he still considered us family. Isabella died a week later. There were no screams or warnings, just a flat tone and a straight line across the screen. My husband collapsed. I did not yell. I did not cry. I just held her until they removed her out of my arms. The funeral was modest and frigid. The majority of the family had withdrawn themselves, some out of shame and others out of hatred. Nobody knew what to say to us. And Adrian? He did come. He arrived in quiet, sat in the rear, did not cry, look at us, or approach the casket. Finally, he rose up, left a single flower, and walked away silently. Today, I'm writing from a silent house. My husband no longer speaks. He spends his days watching television with the volume turned off. I stroll through the empty rooms with my daughter's clothes still folded on her bed. Every now and then, I look back at her last photo when she was still breathing and had a chance. And I think of Adrian, of his words, his broken stare, of what we did and did not do. And I remind myself, death does not come alone, carries remorse and memories with it, and neither can be buried. Now for some comments. Comment 1. I read your whole story. I sat in silence and could only think, what an insane mother. You literally killed him in life and then you expect him to save you. After you took everything from him, now you're asking for an organ. If I were him, I wouldn't have given it to you either. In fact, I'd be in the line of people spitting in your face. I hope his gaze haunts you until your last day. Comments 2. You left him without a home, without food, without emotional support, without a future, and you wanted him to risk his health for you. How can you even ask why he didn't want to donate? The answer is obvious and painful, because you killed him first. Comment 3. Your story is the closest thing I've read to a slow-motion murder. Adrian died when you threw him out on the street like trash and now you're crying because he wouldn't save the one who lied. Did it not occur to you that every time he saw his sister, he was reliving the trauma? The nerve, the ego, the total lack of humanity. Comment 4. The way you minimize everything you did is terrifying. My husband hit him. It sounds like you're saying he spilled his coffee. Your son was physically assaulted, thrown out, abandoned, and vilified by everyone. And you recount it as if it were an uncomfortable anecdote. What kind of emotional psychopath are you? Comment 5. You know what? The worst part of all this was that your daughter confessed she lied and you still decided to use her tragedy to manipulate your son again. You learned nothing. You just changed tactics. First it was guilt, then fear, then public blackmail. You are the nightmare of any human being with a mother. Comment 6. I refuse to feel sorry for you. You made your son's life impossible. Then you tried to paint him as a monster for not donating a damn kidney. You used him like a piece of meat. And when he said no, you tried to manipulate the entire internet. How shameful. What moral depravity. I hope you never find peace. Comment 7. Adrian is a hero for still being alive after what you did to him. He was the one who deserved help. He was the one who needed urgent therapy, but you were too busy protecting your parental egos to see that you were destroying him. And even today, you continue to blame him. Monstrous. Comment 8. What did you expect? That he would give you the kidney and then you'd all pose for a reconciled family photo? This isn't a fairy tale. This is real life. And in real life, the people you destroy don't come back when it's convenient for you. They don't forgive you automatically. They don't save you just because you're bleeding crocodile tears. Comment 9. You used his pain as a public weapon. You exposed him with his full name. You humiliated him after having already thrown him onto the street. And you wonder why he blocked you? The question should be, how did he not sue you? Because he had more than enough reason. It's a miracle you're not in jail. And it's a miracle he's sane. Comment 10. Isabella didn't die from lack of a kidney. She died from a lie and from parents who didn't know how to handle it. The blame isn't Adrian's. It's yours. You killed her with silence, with denial, with manipulation. And now you want to lay the corpse at his feet. I don't buy it. I'm not swallowing. Now on to the next story. Story 2. You're just the IT guy. My family laughed. So, I canceled $62,000 in support and replied, now survive without me. At my parents' golden anniversary dinner, the person I paid for my brother lifted his glass and declared loudly enough for everyone to hear. We all agreed. Jake gets the memories. I got the $1.9 million lake house. My mother applauded. My father smiled. Mayan added, fair is fair. No one looked at me. I did not argue. I didn't inquire who we all were. I simply raised my glass, allowed the silence to lengthen, and said, congrats. I'll just take what's mine. Then I smiled quietly, unconcerned, as if I had already made a decision. I did not come there to fight. I came out of habit, obligation, and perhaps even hope. I reserved the venue, covered the $4,300 catering bill, and paid the band in advance because Dad stated they couldn't afford it this month. I even purchased a special cake with their wedding date inscribed in gold. Even so, I was not acknowledged in the speeches as a son, a family member, or as infrastructure. I sat through the toasts, jokes, and their laughter when my brother declared he never wanted the lake house anyhow. No wife, no children, what exactly would he do with it? Everyone laughed. Even Grandpa Joe glanced aside. I did not. I bit into the pricey fillet, wiped my mouth, and said nothing because I could already feel the shift, the mechanism kicking in. It was not wrath. It did not even hurt. It was evident in a chilly, mechanical way, the kind that turns on after years of being tolerated but not seen. They did not want me at the table. They desired what I offered them. So I departed early and silently. There was no scene, just a smile, a nod to the waiter, and a note to my assistant. First thing tomorrow, quantify every asset I've sponsored in that house. They wouldn't see the consequences because in their minds, I was always the dependable one, the fixer, the donor, the ghost. But that night, I stopped being invisible and began keeping receipts. I didn't sleep that night, and it wasn't because I was upset. I had already passed that stage years ago. I remained up pondering, remembering patterns rather than specific experiences. Because the lake house wasn't the first time they divided the universe into what I could give and receive. I remembered when I covered my sister's $9,800 wedding banquet. When I inquired why she didn't inform me, she chuckled and said, you don't have a spouse or kids. Might as well make yourself useful. I remember driving 6 hours for Christmas only to discover that my seat had been given to a neighbor. She's alone this year, my mother remarked. You'll be fine in the kitchen. The kitchen. And as I went peacefully and without incident, my sister wrote, wow, can't handle being overlooked, huh? I remember checking my banking app that night and freezing the mortgage assistance I'd been paying, the streaming accounts and the shared prime gone. I remembered the SMS I received at 9:04 p.m. That night, everything changed. We talked about it. You've always been a failure. You ruin every holiday, every get-together. We don't need you anymore. That was their idea of closure. No surprise, the lake house felt like the final punchline because to them I was never a member of the family. I was only the finance, emotional labor, technician, and backup. I spent $12,400 for the landscaping that made their anniversary party feasible. Yet, I was not invited. When I inquired, my aunt said, "Oh, it's just immediate family. I hope you understand." When I discontinued the payments, my father texted, "Don't be dramatic." Wasn't that always the phrase? Don't be dramatic. As if years of calm obedience could be transformed into tantrums the moment I stopped offering. I recall canceling my sister's wedding, not out of vengeance, but because she spent my money as if she deserved it, as if I didn't exist. They constantly acted as if it was love and that I was assisting. But what they actually meant was that I was useful, that I remained mute. I would never say no. And I didn't for years because I wished they could see me. I figured if I contributed enough, mended enough, and paid enough, they'd finally view me as more than just the one who got it wrong. But they just never saw utility. I pay and they clap. I give and they distribute it among themselves. I show up and they humiliate me at every sporting event, family gathering, dinner, and milestone. I provided funding for the performance, the illusion, the ideal family with a broken son who didn't ask for much but gave even more. They never thanked you. They simply expected I would keep turning there, sending money and claiming I hadn't noticed. But I noticed when I was injured and they looked the other way. How my mother told others, "It's fine. Really, he still has one good arm." As if it made me recoverable. My brother used to laugh and nickname me RoboCop every Thanksgiving as if I were a party trick. My father said, "We're not going to walk on eggshells just because you had a bad year. One bad year." That's how he described the decade I spent reconstructing my life. That is the pattern. They don't think I'm important, yet they need me. They want presence without the giver, services without the person, and access without acknowledgement. I used to assume they didn't realize how much I gave, but it wasn't. They knew. They relied on it. That's why the lake house was no surprise. It was only the last confirmation. And as I glanced at the tumbler of whiskey in my fingers that night, I came to a decision. I would not continue to give my money, my silence, or my identity. I take everything back because I wasn't the son who returned home to make things right anymore. I was the son who returned to turn the electricity off. I didn't make a big deal the morning after the lake house announcement. I made a list of each room and thing, not out of spite, but for inventory and clarity. Everything I had bought, installed, paid for, or maintained over the years belonged to me again. By 9 a.m., I was in the driveway. My brother opened the door wearing workout shorts and a protein shake. He didn't say anything, just stood there like someone who realized the tide had gone out and all the buried debris was beginning to emerge. First, the obvious. My smart lock was uninstalled in 3 minutes. Dad's sound system and 65-inch OLED TV, which I bought for him because he deserved a real movie experience, are now gone. The central Wi-Fi mesh I established last year to prevent internet drops during my mother's Zoom calls has been removed. The lighting control app, the kitchen smart faucet, and online access for the security camera are all gone. By lunchtime, the house felt foreign. Not because I had broken anything, but because I had removed infrastructure that they had no idea I had been maintaining. I was not malicious. I was precise. The thermostat lost its remote control. The refrigerator's touch panel went dead. Offline monitoring is carried out by the backup generator. Then came the financials. I opened the mortgage account, withdrew my cosigner information, and initiated the review. I knew the conclusion. They would not qualify for a loan following the refinancing I assisted them with 2 years ago. The phone plans, all 5 lines in my name, I transferred complete ownership. If they did not accept within 72 hours, the lines would shut down. I signed into the streaming services. I canceled each one. Netflix, Hulu, HBO, Amazon Prime, and even the common password manager are all gone. Their Amazon delivery is halted. Their password autofill failed. Their living room television displayed only static. My brother finally said something about 2 p.m. "This is crazy." I didn't respond. I simply unplugged the router and went out. Next, closed their company accounts. My parents' business has been relying on my company's infrastructure for over 10 years. Cloud backups, encrypted email, firewall control, and software licensing are all part of my enterprise platform. Never charged them a penny. I opened the gateway and closed their profile to end it. Clean, professional, and final. I left them a message on the dashboard. This system was maintained at no cost for 11 years. As of today, it has been decommissioned. Thank you. They didn't realize how much they relied on me until everything stopped working. By 3:30 p.m., the clinic's main desk messaged me. We're completely locked out. Please help. I did not respond. I forwarded it to a coworker telling him to charge the full emergency fee. Then started the serious cleanup of the lake house. I never wanted it, but I had paid for half of the repairs. New dock, water filtration, and guest cabin upgrades were all from my accounts because I was only assisting. I extracted the invoices and highlighted each transaction. Then I contacted a lawyer. He did not even blink. You want to reclaim or recoup? He inquired. Both, I answered. He began composing a claim quietly and cleanly. No scandal, just facts. Then I returned to the house. The final sweep of the dining table cost $3,800. Mine is reclaimed. The patio chairs, purchased on my card during a family emergency, were loaded into the vehicle. The espresso machine I gave them for Christmas 2 years ago, which my mother said made her feel like someone finally acknowledged her, was wrapped in towels and carefully packaged. My brother attempted to block the passageway at one point. You're not taking the flooring, man. I merely smiled and continued walking because I had my receipts. Literally. By dusk, the house felt hollow. Still intact, but devoid of everything I had poured into it. There was only one thing left. The box, old and wooden, tucked in the back of the closet. They kept old photos and forgotten keepsakes. I opened it. Inside were cards I'd written over the years, messages, hospital bracelets, a dried corsage from my sister's high school dance, and a medal from when I had 2 hands. On top was a folded drawing I created when I was 7. My family, it said. Stick figures were smiling. They had preserved it even after everything. I stared at it for quite a while. Then I closed the box and left it on the dining table. It was the only item I did not remove because I didn't want memories. I desired space. I drove home that night and slept better than I have in years. No calls, texts, or guilt. Just silence. I finally understood. I had not wrecked the family. I had just disconnected myself from the machine that kept it operating. They didn't call immediately, not the following morning, not the day following that. The hush lasted for entire days. However, it was not tranquil. It was pressure like a conduit bulging from the inside and about to burst. Then it did. Day 5, 8:17 a.m. I received the first group message from my mother, father, and brother. You're overreacting. This was a family decision. We thought you'd understand. This doesn't have to be permanent. Let's fix it. You're acting like a stranger. I did not respond. An hour later, my mother sent a separate message. I'm ashamed that you're trying to punish us instead of talking. This isn't you. You're not a monster. That was the tone. Not apology or ownership. Only denial, terror, and projection. They were not sorry. They were afraid. Because for the first time in years I had removed the net, the fallback, the repairer. By lunchtime, my voicemail was filled. My father left 2 identical texts back to back. Just call me. Don't do anything stupid. What they meant by stupid was permanent. They knew I wasn't lying anymore. The situation worsened by the evening. Aunt Gloria shared a vague Facebook status. Some people will throw away blood over ego. Subtle. Not enough to identify me, but everybody knew. The smear effort then escalated significantly. It began with a message from my cousin Tasha. They're saying you're having a breakdown. I attached a screenshot from the family group chat which I was no longer a member of. My brother had written, he's been acting differently lately. We need to give him space. He's not thinking clearly. Then my mom. This is what happens when you bottle things up for years. He was always so distant. They weren't simply attempting to gain compassion. They were rewriting history. I was not strategic. I was in a downward spiral. I was not setting boundaries. I was dangerous. Despite this, no one messaged to inquire as to what had truly occurred. They simply thought that the old story remained true. The quiet brother, the awkward one, the one they pitied. But I was not that person anymore. I was the hurricane they didn't expect. That night, I received a call from a band number. I almost didn't respond. It was Harper, my brother's girlfriend. Her voice shook. "They're trying to bury you." She claimed she had overheard a conversation. My parents held a conference to discuss the exact phrases she used, and they drew together a timetable to make it appear as if I had been erratic for years, trying to portray the wedding cancellation, streaming accounts, and company systems as symptoms of mental degeneration, not a strategy, not a calculating breakdown. Harper claimed that even the therapist they had previously hired was becoming involved. My mother had contacted her and asked if she had ever observed any indicators. That's when I realized they weren't attempting to win me back. They were attempting to discredit me, to undo what I had done by painting me as unstable. The emails appeared next. 2 anonymous ones were sent to my job with vague claims, concerns about recent emotional shifts, and references to troubling behavior. I traced the IP addresses. One came from my parents' hometown library. The other was from a home ISP. I didn't need anything more. They were desperate, and desperate individuals cease covering their hands. But I did not answer, not once, not to messages, posts, or calls. I let silence speak for me because I knew what would happen next. Confrontation. They did indeed turn up on Sunday afternoon. My mother, father, and brother were waiting at my door, as if it were Thanksgiving and they were dropping off a pie. They did not ring the bell. Just 3 performers standing there waiting for their signal. I let them stand for 2 full minutes before opening the door. We didn't invite them in. Did not smile. Just said, "You have 5 minutes." My mother began crying immediately. Not from anguish over exposure. She wasn't apologizing. She was cornered. She launched into a diatribe about family misconceptions and how quickly this had escalated. My father responded with his line, "You've always been intense, but this isn't you." My brother did not speak. Just stood there, jaw tightened. I waited. Then I said this, "You're not here because you care. You're here because the power's off and you don't know how to live in the dark." Silence. Then I looked at my mother. "You let them say I was crazy." I looked at my father. "You watched it happen." I looked at my brother. "And you started it." That was the moment my brother broke. "You're throwing your own family away for what? Pride." I nearly laughed. "No. I'm throwing you out for survival." They were not accustomed to this version of me, the one who did not flinch, the one who didn't require their approval to finish. My mother tried one last thing. "We're your family." And I stated it simply, finally. "No, you were. Now you're just people I used to pay for." I then closed the door. They did not knock again. They did not yell. They just stood there devastated and puzzled, recognizing that the system they had constructed around me had failed and that they had no idea how to reconstruct it without me. They did not expect me to go public. That was their final hope. That I'd remain quiet, that even if I took away the funds, systems, and support, I would still safeguard their reputation. They assumed I would remain in the shadows, that my quiet represented loyalty. It was not. There was restraint. So I opened the vault. First, the post. A simple caption. "For those asking why I went quiet, here's what silence was covering." Attached were screenshots of the group conversation in which my mother stated that he has always been unstable, my brother's message referring to me as a sunk cost, the canceled invoices I paid, and the defamation email tracked back to their network. I did not offer any commentary, no hashtags. There was no anger, just facts. Within an hour, the message had received over 300 shares from friends, colleagues, and even distant relatives. Then I uploaded the second file, which was video footage from my doorbell camera. My mom is standing in my driveway. My father is behind her throwing bricks, swinging branches, and screaming. The same people who claimed I was spiraling. The same people are screaming, "We gave you everything." I blurred my face, not because I had to, but because I wanted the focus to be on the truth rather than retribution. Then came the last upload, a PDF named Receipts. It had bank records from payments I made for their mortgage, streaming, weddings, and tuition. Email confirmations included my signature authorizing home upgrades, travel, and business systems. Legal documents confirmed that I had distanced myself from their debts. There were no edits, no interpretation, just reality. Then I closed my laptop. I didn't check for comments. I didn't wait for reactions because the truth was not for them. It was intended for the people to whom they attempted to lie. By the evening, my inbox was filled with emails from old acquaintances, co-workers, even a few cousins. My cousin Tasha sent one message that stuck out. "You didn't destroy the family. You revealed it." Even better, a quote from my uncle's dental clinic assistant. "So, you were the one keeping it all running. We had no idea. They always said you were just the IT guy. We're sorry." That hit different because that is how the family narrative has always been. I was the broken one, the helper, the unhappy one in need of a cause. And they realized I was the structure. When I went away, everything collapsed. There's no drama, no vengeance, just balance. My mother had removed her social media accounts the following day. My father's email auto-replied, "Out of office indefinitely." My brother went quiet online, erased old posts, and set his profile to private. It was not shame, it was exposure. They couldn't spin it anymore, not while the receipts were public. And that's when the balance shifted. They did not simply lose a son. They forgot the story they told about him. They requested to meet one final time. No group message, no pressure, just a quick email from my father. "If you've got 10 minutes, we'd like to see you." No drama, just closure. It was scripted, premeditated, and polished to sound plausible, as if they had finally engaged someone to edit their apologies. I didn't respond. I showed up. Same house, same driveway I walked away from months ago. My brother wasn't present. It was just my parents waiting in the living room as if this were some bizarre sort of family counseling session. My mother sprang up when she saw me, her eyes already misty. My father did not move. "Thank you for coming," she added. As if we were strangers conducting a commercial transaction. I did not speak. I nodded once and sat across from them. The room was quite clean, two-staged. The fireplace flickered even though it was July. The coffee table was equipped with 2 mugs. One was named World's Best Son. My mother shoved it toward me as if it were going to reset the board. I did not touch it. My father cleared his throat. Then he started into, "We reflected on what happened and what we said. And we want to make it clear. We did not mean to make you feel unwanted." He said it as if he was trying not to cross a legal line, as if this was a carefully crafted damage control statement rather than a confession. My mother responded next, "You've always been really powerful, so capable. We hadn't realized how much pressure you were under." They hadn't realized. That was the theme of the day. "We now disregard you. We have now utilized you. Just an oops. We hadn't noticed." I let them talk. I allowed them to express their regrets about how things looked. They were saddened that the family was so broken now. They talked about treatment, regaining trust, and beginning over. They utilized every phrase except for the ones that mattered. "We were mistaken. We were cruel. We treated you like a service, not as a son." Finally, my father added, "We miss you." Then came quiet waiting. And I gave them something they didn't expect. I stood up calmly, composed, and said, "You do not miss me. You missed the infrastructure. You missed out on funding. You missed the version of me who paid, remained silent, and made you believe it was love." My mom let out a gasp. My father blinked as if someone had smacked him. I did not stop. "You do not miss me. You miss what I gave you. Free labor, silent compliance. The automatic answer is yes." I turned to my mother. "You allowed them to lie about me. You let them claim I was unstable. And when I remained silent, you called it serenity. It wasn't peaceful. I was the one who survived you." Then to my father, "You taught me that loyalty equaled obedience, that love was won through sacrifice. But that was not love. It was utility." They attempted to interrupt. I continued going. "You cannot beg for grace after decades of casual cruelty. You can't pretend this was a misunderstanding. This was a transaction, and I ultimately terminated my subscription. My mother started to cry. Not quiet tears, but heaving sobs as if she were auditioning for absolution. I did not move. "But we're still your parents," she muttered. And I said, "You were. And you used that title like a credit card with no restrictions. It's now maxed out, and you're responsible for the default." My father stood up. He appeared older than I remembered, smaller, as if he had been deflated. He said one thing, his voice breaking. "Is that it? Have you just finished?" I stared him in the eyes. "No. I was finished the night you gave away my seat for hardwood bargains. I'm just turning off the lights." They had nothing left to say, and I did not wait for a goodbye. I stepped out past the framed images that were never updated. They kept the fireplace lit for show. Past the phony mug that read "World's Best Son." I closed the door behind me, did not slam it. I just clicked it shut like a story ending. That night I received one final message from my mother. "You will come to regret this one day. Family is forever." And I responded with the one reality they never expected. "No, family is something that one earns. And you returned it broken." I then blocked her number. Then I slept. There is no guilt. There's no noise. There's no weight on my chest because I did not just say no to them. I said yes to myself for the first time in 20 years. Now on to the next story. Story 3. My fiancée left me for my brother on our wedding day with my parents' full support. Now she sought help against her husband's controlling behavior. I, 35M, had the most terrible day of my life 2 years ago. An hour prior to our wedding, my fiancée Alexandra, 32F, called to inform me that she was unable to proceed. The actual bombshell. Behind my back, she had been seeing my brother Nathan, 40M, and our parents had even supported their relationship. Have you ever watched a movie where everything seems to be going well until it all goes wrong? My life was like that. I was making good money as a senior software developer at a rapidly expanding computer business, had recently purchased a home in a desirable Boston suburb, and was getting married to the woman I believed to be my true love. Over the course of 5 years, Alex and I had planned our future and built a life together, and I thought we were in agreement on everything. Alex was a marketing executive representing her company when I first met her at a tech convention. She was intelligent, driven, and had a knack for making every space she entered seem brighter. Our mutual passion for independent video games and esoteric science fiction films made us click right away. We conversed for 6 hours on our first date until the restaurant staff essentially had to eject us. In retrospect, I can see all the red flags I ignored because I was so enamored with her. Her treatment of service staff ought to have been the first warning sign. On the surface, she was always courteous, but her tone was tinged with contempt. Then there were the smaller lies, which were initially little ones, such as claiming to be out with friends when she was actually working late. She had an amazing capacity to make everything about her needs, never apologized when she damaged my feelings, and persisted on getting what she wanted. However, I dismissed it all by reminding myself that relationships necessitate compromise and that no one is flawless. My family's dynamics ought to have been an additional red flag. I work as an IT professional and I'm doing okay. Nothing great. In contrast, my brother Nathan is the perfect child who is incapable of doing anything wrong. He is a successful businessman who, after graduating from college, founded his own IT company which, by his early 30s, had grown to be worth millions of dollars. Why can't you be more like Nathan? Or Nathan would have done it this way. Were common refrains when I was growing up. My parents, who are both in their 60s, never attempted to conceal their partiality. I recall a Christmas when I was 15 years old. My parents' old coffee machine was breaking, so I spent the entire year saving money to get them a really excellent one. After arriving late for Christmas dinner, Nathan gave them an envelope and declared that he had purchased a cruise for them. They spent the remainder of the evening savoring cruise brochures while my meticulously wrapped coffee machine sat forgotten beneath the tree. That was only one of many examples. Every move I made was questioned because it wasn't what Nathan would have done, and every accomplishment I made was evaluated against his success. I should have seen Alex's eyes light up when Nathan told her about his business endeavors when I first introduced her to my family. I should have seen how she progressively began to get closer to him during family get-togethers and how their discussions seemed to become more in-depth and personal. However, I was too preoccupied with organizing the wedding and envisioning our future together to notice it. Like all previous important days, the wedding day began as usual. I felt both anxious and eager. Alex had fallen in love with the gorgeous vineyard location we had selected, which was outside the city and offered a breathtaking view of the mountains. The flowers, the music, and the meticulously prepared meal that had taken months to perfect were all ready. My phone rang that morning while I was standing in my hotel room fiddling with my tie for the 100th time. Alex informed me she couldn't marry me in a chilly, almost clinical voice. Then the actual bombshell arrived. Nathan was her genuine love. She sounded no apologies. She merely stated that she needed to follow her intuition as she described how she and Nathan had been dating for months. I stood there with my hands shaking so much that I could not hold the phone. She hoped that one day I would comprehend that they had attempted but were unable to fight their emotions. The worst part is that I found out my folks already knew. When I arrived at the location to handle the repercussions that morning, Nathan had informed them. They were too busy attempting to manage the situation to spare me disgrace to warn me. With the bold suggestion that perhaps it was best, my mother, Catherine, 62F, said, "You wouldn't want to marry someone who doesn't love you." My father simply nodded, more concerned with the opinions of their golf club acquaintances than with his son's struggles. The hours that followed were a haze of canceled merchants, perplexed patrons, and pitying glances while I sat in a back room, still wearing my wedding suit, trying to comprehend how my entire life had fallen apart in one morning. My best man attempted to take care of the practical details. My parents informed me that there had been an unfortunate situation and the wedding had been canceled after some guests had already come, all dressed to the nines. I didn't realize the full scope of their betrayal until months later. I learned that my parents had actively pushed Alex to leave me for Nathan. Through a mutual acquaintance, I found they had assured her that she would have a better life with Nathan and that she was too good for me, promising to provide for her financially if she decided to choose him over me. For months, they had been planning this behind my back while grinning at me and assisting with the wedding preparations. The buddy shared with me text conversations in which my mother set up accidental meetings between Nathan and Alex, giving them chances to hang out. Alex had been informed by my mother that Nathan had always harbored feelings for her and that they would be a better fit. Knowing how significant Alex's career goals were, my parents even offered to help her launch her own marketing consultancy if she decided to go with Nathan. I walked away from everything that day. I moved to a distant state, quit my job, and stopped communicating with my family. I updated my email, my phone number, everything. I couldn't bear to live in the house I had purchased with all the memories, so I let the bank foreclose on it. The awkward interactions with mutual acquaintances who were at a loss for words and the pitying glances from coworkers who had been invited to the wedding were too much for me to bear. My therapist, whom I began seeing to cope with the trauma of it all, was the only one I continued to communicate with. She assisted me in realizing that what I had gone through was a significant betrayal by everyone who was meant to love and care for me, not just a failed relationship. We unraveled how my parents' partiality had influenced my relationships and sense of self as we worked through the years of family dynamics that had brought us to this place. Although they haven't been easy, the last 2 years have been essential. I rented a modest apartment in a peaceful area, got a new job at another computer business in Denver, and began gradually reestablishing my life. Through a local hiking group, I gained new friends who welcomed me for who I am now and didn't know anything about my background. I began meditation, worked on my mental health, and discovered how to be content on my own. I even hesitantly resumed dating, just casual dinners and coffee meetings, nothing serious. Every date made it clearer to me that Alex's behavior and the toxic relationships in my family were more important than my personal value. I discovered how to follow my gut and recognize warning signs in others rather than justifying them. I poured myself into new tasks at work, which led to a promotion and the appreciation of my coworkers. For the first time in my life, Nathan's accomplishments were not being used to gauge my own. I could just produce my best job and be myself, and that would be plenty. My newfound acquaintances appreciated me for who I am, not for what they believed I ought to be. I believed the chapter of my life was finally over. I had a good group of friends, was doing well at work, and was even considering purchasing a home once more without the looming specter of my family's expectations. I had established a new life for myself, one that was based on my own terms. Then Alex arrived at my door last week. Date 1. Last week, I nearly didn't recognize Alex when I opened my door and saw her standing there. I had lost the slick, self-assured marketing executive I had known. Someone who appeared to have not slept well in weeks took her place. Her once flawless makeup was unable to cover up the heavy circles under her eyes, and her fancy attire had been swapped out for a simple sweater and trousers. When I allowed her in, she was trembling, not from the chilly Denver night, but from what I soon discovered to be ongoing anxiety. She told me everything while we sat in my living room, which is where I've been reconstructing my life for the past 2 years. As my parents had predicted, her marriage to Nathan had begun happily ever after. He lavished her with costly presents, helped her launch her own marketing firm, and purchased her a home in Boston's most affluent neighborhood. However, the dream soon became a nightmare. It turns out that underneath his endearing facade, Nathan is precisely who I always believed him to be. Everyone's favorite wealthy, charismatic businessman is a skilled manipulator. Alex talked about how he gradually took over every part of her life behind closed doors. It started out with suggestions on her business choices. Demands concerning who she could collaborate with followed. He eventually took a seat on the board of her business and was given the last word on all contracts. She described the gaslighting to me, including how he would move items around their home and claim she was responsible, how he would contradict their conversations from a few hours prior, and how he would tell their acquaintances she was losing her mind any time she attempted to confront him. The worst thing, everything was made possible by our parents, particularly our mother, Catherine. Alex wiped away her tears and remarked, "Your mom tells me I'm lucky to have Nathan and that I need to try harder to make him happy. That's just how successful men protect their interests." She responded when I informed her about his threat to steal everything if I left. Hearing about their son, my nephew, who is now entangled in all of this, was more heartbreaking than Alex's tragedy. Alex claims that even though he is only 18 months old, Nathan is already acting in a domineering manner toward him. Nathan has very stringent restrictions regarding everything, including the baby's playthings, colors, and when he can sleep. If the infant cries during his crucial calls, he becomes irate and accuses Alex of not managing him properly. She started crying when I brought up the subject of a potential divorce. Nathan has stated unequivocally that he will ruin her if she leaves. He has the resources, the contacts, and, above all, the backing of our parents. He has vowed to deny her custody of their son, force her to pay for her legal bills, and make sure she never again works in marketing. She came to me for that reason, to testify in court. She needs someone who is aware of the reality about our family, someone who can discuss Nathan's actual character, the pattern of deception, and the enabling actions of our parents. She believes that my evidence could support her cause, particularly with relation to custody. "No," I replied. I didn't argue or yell. I simply informed her that I couldn't assist. I'll probably never forget the expression on her face. The difficulty is that I've learned in therapy for the past 2 years that I'm not in charge of solving other people's problems. I put a lot of effort into setting limits and removing my family's poisonous influence from my life. My phone was overflowing with texts the following day. News of Alex's visit had somehow spread. Suddenly, I had a lot to say from people I had not spoken to since the wedding fiasco. They referred to me as cowardly, selfish, and uncaring. A particularly nasty note about how I was proving my family right, that I was too weak and self-centered to step up when it mattered, was emailed to me by Alex's former maid of honor. The level of hypocrisy is astounding. 2 years ago, none of these folks defended me when I was the one in pain. None of them gave assistance or pointed out the manipulation by my family. They now asked me to put my painstakingly reconstructed life and mental health at danger in order to support the woman who deceived me. One message struck especially hard. "Your nephew, an innocent child, is involved," a mutual friend wrote. Alex doesn't deserve to suffer for everything he did to you. And that's the reason I can't sleep at night. That young guy is on my mind all the time. Being born into this chaos was not anything he requested. None of this was his choice. Alex is growing up in a home that might leave him permanently scarred if what she says is accurate, which I think is based on my experience with Nathan. I understand what it's like to be raised in Nathan's shadow. Will things go worse for his son? However, becoming involved would require me to reintegrate with my family. It would entail dealing with Nathan once more, enduring the manipulation of our parents, and possibly being the object of my brother's retaliation. I might lose everything I've worked so hard to build over the last 2 years. I am therefore at a crossroads. Do I uphold the limits I've worked so hard to create, putting my stability and mental health first? Or should I put everything on the line to save a defenseless child from the same toxic family dynamics that harm me? To be honest, I have no idea what to do. My therapist advises me to carefully consider what I can contribute in a practical way without endangering my own health. However, every time I attempt to reason with it, I see the image of that young boy. I need your opinion, Reddit. Am I being self-centered by not offering assistance? Or should I defend the tranquility I've at last discovered? What exactly would it look like to assist my nephew without getting sucked into the family conflict again? Update 2. A week has passed since my last report, and things have become worse in unexpected ways. My family seems desperate to pull me back into their insanity, even though I hoped that ignoring everything would make it go away. Nathan sent me an email yesterday morning. My stomach dropped when I saw his name in my inbox. It was a brief but menacing message. I've heard that our ex-fiancé came to you in tears. If you know what's best for you, stay out of family affairs. It's been 2 years since you were involved. Don't change anything. For a long time I stared at those words, feeling a mixture of sorrow and, shockingly, fury. The ostensibly wealthy and successful brother is threatening his own sibling because he fears losing power. If it weren't so depressing, the irony would be funny. However, Nathan wasn't the only one who chose to end the 2-year silence. I was at work when our mother, Catherine, called. Some part of me still freezes when I see Mom on my caller ID, even if I should have ignored it. The same tone Mother used to try to control me as a child. Her voice sounded sickly sweet. Without even saying hello, she began, "Sweetheart, I know Alex came to see you. You must realize that although she is going through a tough moment, it does not imply that she is thinking rationally. Nathan is making every effort to be a decent father and spouse. She changed her strategy when I didn't answer. Your brother's company is currently at a pivotal moment. Everything he's built might be destroyed by this divorce foolishness. He deserves better from his own brother. Don't you think?" I was able to find my voice at last. As if I were entitled to better treatment from my own family. There was an overwhelming quiet on the other end. The guilt trip followed. What's best for both of our guys has always been our goal. Families must keep together, even though parents make errors. At this moment, Nathan needs you to be the bigger person. I ended the call. My phone began to vibrate with texts from members of my extended family a few minutes later. Catherine had apparently rallied the whole family. After the wedding fiasco, my aunts, uncles, and cousins, people who hadn't bothered to check on me, became quite worried about family unity. A cousin wrote, "Neither of your parents is growing any younger. Do you want them to worry about raising their grandchild in a dysfunctional household for the rest of their lives?" Another message was sent. "True men don't harbor resentment. Be the larger person." My father's sister sent me the most vexing message. "Although your brother erred, he granted Alex all of her wishes. You're supporting her conduct and she's just being ungrateful. It's amazing how they've created this story in which I'm the bad guy for not supporting their idealized family image. They will disregard any proof of Nathan's abusive behavior because they are so committed to his image as the successful son." Then something that truly shocked me occurred tonight. I was contacted by a former coworker of Nathan's who still works with him. He claimed to have seen several unsettling things happen at work, including Nathan hurling explosive outbursts at staff members, threatening them covertly, and falsifying financial records. He claims that a number of workers have left because of the poisonous workplace, but Nathan's attorneys have them bound by non-disclosure agreements. According to this coworker, if I assisted Alex, perhaps others might be more inclined to speak up about Nathan's actions. He did, however, caution me that Nathan had been asking me questions about my new life in Denver, such as my address and place of employment. The danger is obvious. Nathan will target my new life if I assist Alex. He has the means to seriously challenge me on a personal and professional level, and as always, our parents would be there for him. I've put forth too much effort to create this tranquil life. My therapist says I've made amazing strides in establishing healthy boundaries. I have true friends who embrace me for who I am, and my career is going great. Scares me to think of losing all that. However, my colleagues' remarks about further possible witnesses continue to cross my mind. This is about more than just Alex and my nephew. If what he says is accurate, dozens of people might be harmed by Nathan's misuse of authority. I've been recording everything, even the intimidating email, the deceptive phone call, and the flying monkey attacks from family members. Although she tells me that I'm not required to burn myself alive to keep others warm, my therapist says this might be significant. Not only should I assist Alex, but I also have a moral duty to call out Nathan's actions before he causes more harm. But am I prepared for the impending storm? I need your advice, Reddit. How can you oppose someone who has all the resources, family support, and power on their side, and is it worth putting everything I've rebuilt at risk in order to act morally? Update 3. I struggled with what to do for several restless nights after my last update. Though not in the manner anyone had anticipated, the matter has settled itself. I want to tell you everything that transpired and the reasons behind my decisions. I must first clarify a crucial point. I had a breakthrough session with my therapist following Catherine's deceptive call and Nathan's threatening email. We talked about how my family has always followed the same pattern. Incite a problem, put pressure on me to resolve it, and then utilize my assistance to keep their poisonous system in place. She made it clear to me that getting directly involved would only make this cycle worse, but she also made a very important point. There are ways to help that don't involve me re-engaging with my family's manipulation or sacrificing my mental health. That's when I decided what to do. I sent Child Protective Services a thorough anonymous report. I didn't make this choice lightly. I spent 3 days compiling all of the information I had, including screenshots of the family's nasty texts, emails, text messages, and Nathan's threatening letter. I incorporated all of Alex's information regarding Nathan's domineering actions toward their son. I described how our family has a history of condoning abuse and hiding issues in order to keep up appearances. The report covered more ground than merely the current state of affairs. I gave background information on Nathan's manipulative tendencies and how our parents have traditionally condoned his actions. I gave specific examples, such as how they concealed his college drunk driving episode, how they settled a former employee's harassment lawsuit, and how they have continuously exploited their resources and connections to shield him from repercussions. Additionally, I sent proof of possible financial irregularities that my former coworker had brought up. I thought this gave a more complete picture of Nathan's personality and the depth of his manipulation, even though it might not have a direct bearing on the CPS investigation. Waiting was the most difficult part. Since I was reporting anonymously, I knew I wouldn't receive updates on the status of CPS investigations, which take time. However, I had at least taken a step that would benefit my nephew while still respecting my personal boundaries. Then things began to move more quickly than I had anticipated. Nathan sent me a flurry of angry messages 3 days after I submitted the report. His emails became more and more erratic. You think you can hide behind anonymity? I know it was you. You've just made the biggest mistake of your life. I'll make sure you never work in tech again. You think you're safe in Denver? Watch your back. You're dead to this family, remember that. You chose this. Catherine had a different but no less informative reaction. I'm still troubled by the voicemail she left. How could you do this to your own family? We gave you everything and this is how you repay us? Nathan is devastated. They're investigating him like a common criminal. His reputation could be ruined. I hope you're happy with yourself. What's interesting, none of the accusations were refuted by any of them. They were upset with me because I dared to reveal the truth. not because I made unfounded accusations. After mostly remaining mute during this ordeal, my father suddenly revealed his actual nature in a letter. He threatened to remove me from his will if I didn't fix the situation immediately. His lawyer wrote the letter. I recognized the hypocrisy of threatening to disown someone who had already left the family. Then Alex sent a surprise message. Hers was shorter than the others and had a distinct tone. I know it was you. Thank you. I'm sorry for everything. I was more affected by those 9 words than by all of Nathan's threats put together. They were the first sincere admission of guilt I had ever gotten from anyone connected to this catastrophe. I learned through rumors that Alex had the leverage she required because of CPS's participation. Nathan's threats of assuming complete custody were less significant because an inquiry was still underway. While the inquiry is ongoing, she was able to obtain emergency temporary custody of their kid. The response from the family has been explosive. The complete force of flying monkeys has been unleashed. My inbox is overflowing with messages from distant cousins I haven't spoken to in years, accusing me of betraying my own blood and ruining the family. On social media, former family friends are expressing their sadness at the way jealousy splits families apart in ambiguous, passive-aggressive condolence posts. The problem is that I'm not as affected by their responses as I used to be. I've never had this level of clarity before, thanks to 2 years of treatment and self-work. Their manipulating techniques are evident to me. Every threat, guilt trip, and effort to get me to reconsider my choice only serves to prove that I chose the right one. My family is upset because I refuse to fulfill my designated part in their dysfunction, not because I have harmed them. My therapist pointed out I violated the pattern they have been using for decades by opting to safeguard my nephew through legitimate procedures instead of taking part in their cover-up. The fallout has been dramatic but illuminating. I've had to react to the circumstance by taking a number of measures to make sure they were aware of any threats. I first alerted the security people at my employer about the probable harassment. In order to safeguard myself against any possible reprisals, I also started working with a lawyer. I've had to keep my social media presence totally secret and bolster my personal security measures because of the situation. I didn't want to perform these actions, but they were essential for my security and comfort. But I've also received unanticipated help. A number of cousins who had previously remained silent have privately expressed their pride in me for confronting the family. I've received calls from 2 of Nathan's former workers who want to provide statements in favor of Alex after hearing the whole story. Even some old friends who had previously condemned my choice have changed their minds. Above all, I am comfortable with my choice. Yes, there may be repercussions. Nathan may attempt to undermine my career. The family may actually carry out their threats. However, I'm not basing my decisions on my fear of their reactions for the first time in my life. You're missing the point. Whoever messaged me and said that I'm taking the coward's way out by reporting anonymously rather than going up to them personally. This has nothing to do with conflict or retaliation. It was about figuring out how to support them without putting my own mental health at risk or being entangled in their poisonous relationship again. I have no idea what will occur next. Custody disputes can last many months or even years, and CPS investigations can take many different paths. However, I am aware that I upheld my personal boundaries while doing everything I could to protect an innocent youngster. I discovered a technique to assist without having to burn myself alive to keep others warm. Thank you to everyone who has been reading this narrative and giving guidance. I learned from your encouragement that sometimes doing the right thing doesn't mean being the most dramatic or combative. Sometimes it comes down to figuring out how to protect yourself while yet bringing about change. Keep in mind that you don't have to choose between defending yourself and assisting others if you find yourself in a similar circumstance. Even if it isn't immediately apparent, there is frequently a middle ground. Furthermore, just because you were born into poisonous family systems doesn't mean you have to keep them up. Let me conclude by saying, I believe that the worst thing that could happen to me was losing my fiancé to my brother 2 years ago. I now see that it served as the wake-up call I needed to escape a dysfunctional family structure. Your lowest point can occasionally serve as the starting point for a better existence. My last update will be this one. I believe I made the proper decision for myself and my nephew, regardless of what occurs next. Now on to the next story. Story 4. I gave my father a $20,000 birthday gift, but he said money doesn't buy respect. Mediocre. My mother nodded, so I tore up the check and stopped paying their bills. My name is Wilson. I'm 24 now, but this happened a while ago when I tried to give my dad, Omar, the biggest birthday present of my life. Ever since I was a kid, my dad was always my hero. He worked in a factory. He'd come home exhausted with calloused hands, but he always brought me something. A little toy car, an old ball, cheap candy. No matter what it was, I saw it like he was giving me the world. He'd say, "You're my champ," and ruffle my hair, and I felt like the happiest kid on the planet. My mom, Marcella, would be in the kitchen making tasty food with the little we had. And my younger brother, Juan, was the typical little kid who played with everything he found. We were poor, but I felt like we had everything. That was until I turned 22. That's when everything changed. I found a way to make money online. Something that started as a hobby. I uploaded videos teaching simple things like how to fix a cell phone, how to edit photos, that sort of stuff. One day, one of them went viral, and suddenly major brands were paying me to promote their products. In less than a year, I was making more money than my dad had ever seen in his life sweating in that factory. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't easy at first, but compared to what he went through, it felt like a game to me. That's where the problem started. My dad didn't handle it well at the beginning. He'd make jokes like, "Ooh, the millionaire of the house. Don't forget us poor folk." But I noticed something off in his expression. His eyes weren't smiling like before. It was envy, though it was hard for me to accept that. He'd spent his whole life working himself to the bone for a miserable wage, and I, his son, was swimming in money without suffering like he did. I think it ate him up inside. Even so, I didn't want it to tear us apart. With my earnings, I started paying the rent, electricity, water, and internet so that Juan could play his video games. I even bought them a new TV because the old one didn't work anymore. My mom would say, "Thanks, son," in a dry but sincere tone, and Juan would just say, "Cool," and keep doing his own thing. But my dad never thanked me. He'd grumble or change the subject as if my help offended him. Then his birthday arrived. I wanted to do something special, something big. I thought about giving him a $20,000 check. It wasn't just money. It was my way of giving back everything he gave me as a kid, of telling him, "Dad, now you can rest. I'll look after you." I spent weeks imagining his reaction, nervous but excited. I wanted him to be proud of me. The day came on a Saturday. My mom made roast chicken. We put up cheap balloons and a banner that said, "Happy birthday, Omar." Juan was on the couch with his phone, and my dad was in his armchair with a beer. I waited until after the cake, then stood up, my heart racing. I took the envelope from my pocket and gave it to him. "Dad, this is for you," I said, trying to sound calm. "Happy birthday." He raised an eyebrow, opened the envelope, and saw the check. I expected a smile, a hug, something, anything, but got nothing. Just silence. My mom and Juan watched curiously. Then my dad spoke in a tone. "What is this?" "It's a present, Dad. $20,000 for you to do whatever you want. Maybe quit the factory." I couldn't finish. He let out a dry laugh like it disgusted him and threw the check onto the table as if it were a dirty rag. "Money? This is what you give me?" he said, raising his voice. "Money doesn't buy respect, you mediocre fool. You think your money is going to impress me?" I froze. I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. I wanted to say something, but words wouldn't come out. I just stared at him, hoping it was a joke, but his eyes were full of contempt. A contempt I had never seen before. My mom crossed her arms. "It's true, Wilson. Money isn't everything. You should know that." And Juan, who almost never chimes in, snickered and added, "Yeah, bro, that's a crappy present. Guess you don't really know Dad." I felt like my world was crashing down. I'd planned this for weeks, thinking it would be one of the best moments of our lives, but instead, they were crushing me. The worst part was still to come. Juan got up and gave his gift to my dad. A cheap little keychain with a tiny car on it, something he must have bought for $2 at a store. My dad took it in both hands, smiled like he'd been handed gold, and said, "Thanks, son. You really know how to give gifts, not like some people." That phrase broke me. I looked at my family. My dad with his keychain, my mom nodding, my brother smiling like he was better than me, and something inside me snapped. I grabbed the check from the table and left the house without saying a word. The outside air hit my face, but it didn't calm me. And as I walked, I tore the check in tears. I was trembling with anger and pain. Couldn't sleep that night. So, I decided that if they didn't want my money, they wouldn't get it. I'd stop paying their bills. I'd stop helping them. If they so despised what I did, let them manage on their own. The next day, I made my decision. For months, I'd been the one supporting the house, paying electricity, water, internet, everything. Even the new TV I bought them was still in the living room, and I was sure they were using it while talking bad about me. So I said, enough. If my money was so worthless to them, if they saw me as a show-off for trying to help, then I wouldn't keep doing it. I canceled the automatic payments I'd set up from my account and stopped sending them a single cent. If they despised what I did so much, then let them figure it out on their own. The first few days after that were strange. I felt free, like I'd taken a huge weight off my shoulders. But it also hurt. A part of me hoped my dad would call me, that he'd say, "Wilson, I made a mistake. Let's talk." But it never happened. Neither he nor my mom nor Juan tried to reach out. The silence was the worst part. It was like they didn't care that I wasn't around anymore, or worse, like they felt relieved. A week passed and then the drama started. My mom texted me, "Wilson, the power's been cut. What's going on with the payments?" I didn't reply. Then one wrote, "Hey, there's no internet. What did you do?" I still didn't answer. Finally, my dad called, but it wasn't to apologize. His voice was full of resentment. "What's your problem? You think you can punish us because we didn't applaud your little gift? You're ungrateful." I hung up without a word. I wasn't going to let them make me feel guilty again. That's when I realized something that broke my heart. All of them envied me. It wasn't just my dad. My mom with her forced thanks and Juan with his "I don't care" attitude also resented my success in their own ways. My dad was the most obvious. Sure, he'd spent his life working for peanuts, and I, in just a couple of years, had earned more than he ever dreamed of. But my mom and Juan, too, saw me as a threat in their own way, as though my success made them feel smaller. After that call, I isolated myself. I kept making my videos, earning more money, but I didn't talk about my family to my friends or on social media. It was as if I deleted them from my life. But I couldn't shake the loneliness. One night, while editing a video, I started thinking about how things used to be when my dad would bring me those cheap little toys and I'd look at him like he was Superman. When did everything go so wrong? Was it my fault for earning money so quickly? Or had that envy always been there, waiting to come out? A month later, after all that silence, my mom messaged me. It said, "Wilson, we need to talk. Things are really tough here." I didn't know what to expect, but something in me softened a bit. Maybe I felt guilty for leaving them high and dry, or maybe I missed my family despite how they'd torn me apart. I answered with a simple, "Okay." When I got to the house, I felt knots in my stomach. It was strange to return after so much time. I knocked and my mom, Marcella, opened. She had dark circles under her eyes and messy hair like she hadn't slept well in days. She let me in without saying much, just a curt, "Come in." The dining room looked the same as ever, but the feeling was different. My dad's birthday banner was obviously gone, but the TV I'd bought was still there on low volume. Juan was sprawled on the couch looking at his phone, and my dad Omar was in his armchair with a beer in his hand, as usual. No one greeted me warmly. They just looked at me and the air turned heavy. I sat in a dining chair facing my mom, who stood with her arms crossed. I thought she might say something gentle like, "We missed you," or maybe, "Hey, sorry about what happened." But no, what she said chilled me. "Wilson, this can't go on," she started. And it sounded more like a scolding than a plea. "They cut the power for 3 days last week. The internet's been off for weeks. Do you want us to sink because of your pride?" I stayed quiet, trying to process it. Was she really blaming me after everything? Before I could answer, my dad let out a sarcastic chuckle from his armchair and jumped in. Right? The great Wilson punishing us because we didn't cheer for his check, he said, looking at me like I was a stranger. What did you expect? That we'd thank you for throwing your money in our faces. That hurt a lot. I tried to keep calm and answered, though my voice trembled a bit. That wasn't about showing off, Dad. I wanted to help you, to finally give you something good. Everything I did was because I wanted to support you. My mom shook her head as if she didn't believe me. Supporting us isn't about throwing money at us and then taking it away because you don't like how we reacted. That's selfish, Wilson. That's when one glanced up from his phone and tossed in his own comment with that annoying little laugh that drives me crazy. Besides, bro, if you're doing so well, why not keep paying our stuff? It's nothing for you, right? He said, shrugging. Or do you prefer to see us screwed over? I looked at each of them in turn. My dad with his beer and his scorn, my mom with that judge, my brother with his careless attitude. It was like the birthday scene all over again, only worse. They were attacking me, making me feel like I was the bad guy for not continuing to be their ATM. Something in me broke again. I stood up with my hands clenched into fists. If my money bothers you so much, then you don't need it, right? I said, staring my dad straight in the eyes. I'm tired of you treating me like garbage for trying to help you. My dad stood up too, and for a second, I thought he was going to come closer, but he just pointed at the door. Then leave. We don't need a show-off like you around here, he growled. I always knew you'd start thinking you're better than us. My mom said nothing, just lowered her gaze. One snickered again and turned back to his phone. And me? I couldn't take it anymore. I spun around and left the house, slamming the door so hard I'm sure the neighbors heard it. As I walked toward my car, I felt tears burning my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Not this time. That night, I promised myself I wouldn't let them step on me again. I tried to help them, to give them everything I could, and all I got was contempt in return. I was done. A week went by after that. I carried on with my life, posting videos, working on my projects, trying not to think about them. Then my phone rang. It was my dad, Omar. When I saw his name, I almost didn't pick up. I thought about letting it ring, but something made me hit the green button. His voice wasn't like the last time, full of anger. This time it was broken. Wilson's son, he began. And just that, it shocked me because he hadn't called me son in years. Please listen. We need your help. We don't have enough money for the bills. The power's about to be shut off again. And the water. I don't know how we'll pay for everything. I swear I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't take the check. Sorry I pushed you away. I was an idiot. Forgive me just this once. I stayed silent. Hearing him beg like that was something I never imagined. Part of me wanted to believe him, to run over and help them the way I always used to. But then I remembered his birthday. How he threw the check on the table. How he called mediocre and stuck up. My mom and Juan backing him up while making me feel worthless. That apology was too little, too late. Dad, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Do you know how it felt when you treated me like garbage? When you told me my gift was worthless. I did everything I could for you, and it was never enough. I can't keep doing this. He tried interrupting, begging more. Please, Wilson, just this one time. We don't know what to do. We're your family. You should have thought about that sooner, I answered. I'm not going to help you. We're done. I hung up and put my phone on silent. My heart was racing, but I didn't regret it. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control. I wasn't going to be their lifeline after nearly drowning under their envy and scorn. If they couldn't appreciate me when I held out my hand, they didn't deserve that hand again. I haven't heard from them since. A couple of weeks have gone by, and although my mom messaged me calling me cruel, I didn't reply. One hasn't bothered to text and my dad hasn't called again. I guess they're trying to manage on their own like they always said they wanted. And me, I'm learning to live without that weight. I keep earning my money and finally I feel like I don't have to prove anything to anyone. Update. Hi everyone. I see many comments from you, some supporting my decision and others questioning it, saying that family stands by each other no matter what. But that's exactly what I tried to do. Support them, help them, and all I got in return was their contempt. So my decision won't change. Many of you also asked for an update on what happened with my family after I cut off all support and stopped talking to them. It's been 2 months since my last post, and yesterday, I found out some things that honestly, I'm not sure how to feel about them. I'll share what I learned because it's still crazy to me. I spoke to a close cousin who told me everything. Turns out my dad Omar got fired from the factory where he had worked his whole life. According to my cousin, the company was downsizing staff, and since he wasn't performing like before, his age and exhaustion caught up with him. He was one of the first to go. He was left with nothing. No pay, no savings, no way to cover the bills that had been piling up ever since I stopped helping them. In the end, they couldn't keep paying the rent at the house where we all used to live, and they got evicted. Kicked out. My cousin said it was a disaster. The neighbors saw them throwing their stuff out on the street while my mom cried, and my dad was yelling at everyone. Now, my dad got a new job, but it's just a shadow of what he had before. He's working as a security guard in a parking lot. Overnight shifts that pay next to nothing. My cousin says he looks worn out, barely making enough to eat, constantly complaining about how unfair life is. I don't know exactly how much he earns, but it's probably a mediocre salary that doesn't come close to covering what they need. My mom, Marcella, is also in a tough spot. She had to sell the TV I bought them, the one they used to watch while they criticized me. She sold it for a few bucks to a neighbor, presumably to buy food or pay some debt. My cousin says she spends her days looking for anything left to sell, but there's hardly anything left. The place they're living in now is a little rented room in a cheap neighborhood with almost no furniture. It's like everything they built has collapsed. And my brother Juan, well, he decided he wasn't going to sync with them. He moved out to live with a friend of his, one of those guys he used to play video games with all day. He left my parents behind without a backward glance. My cousin says Juan is going around saying it's not his problem and that he's fed up with everything. I don't know how my dad took that, but I imagine he's not happy his favorite son left him like that. When my cousin told me all this, I didn't know how to feel. Part of me felt bad, like maybe I could have prevented it if I'd kept helping them. But then I think about how they treated me, their scorn, all the times they made me feel like nothing, and that feeling fades. They chose this. My dad could have accepted my help. He could have appreciated what I tried to do, but he clung to his pride. My mom and Juan backed him up, and now they're facing the consequences. Meanwhile, I'm living my own life. I just signed a contract with a big brand that's going to pay me more than I earned last year. I'm saving up to move to a better apartment, and for the first time, I feel like I'm building something for myself, not to please anyone else. Sometimes I look at my phone and consider writing them, but then I remember what they said to me and I change my mind. That's all Reddit. I think my family and I are officially on different paths. I don't know if they'll ever try to reach out again, but for now, I'm good where I am. What do you think? Did I do the right thing by staying firm, or should I have given in at some point? Thanks for reading again. It really helps me to put all this into words. Now on to the next story. Story 5. My sister-in-law snooped and stole our baby's name, then announced it right after she gave birth. But her face immediately dropped when she realized that we tricked her. So, I have been married to my husband, Kevin, for 5 years. We have a 3-year-old daughter, and I'm currently pregnant with twins. My brother-in-law, Terrence, has been married to his wife, Jess, for 7 years. Jess and I are total opposites. Jess is an extrovert. She's kind of loud, boisterous, and some would even say abrasive. I'm an introvert. I'm not quiet or shy, but I am reserved. I'm also very observant. The first time I met Jess, I told Kevin that we would be like oil and water. We have never been overtly hostile towards each other, but also have never gone out of our way to bond. Jess and I have been in a one-sided beef since the day Kevin and I started dating. I give her zero thought if I don't have to, and yet I live rent-free in her mind based on snide comments she's made over the years. The reason why is jealousy. Kevin and I dated for only a year before we got engaged. We then were married within 6 months of that engagement. We had an actual wedding with a ceremony and reception, went on a honeymoon, bought a house in the suburbs, and got pregnant in rapid succession. Both of us have good careers and are financially stable. Mother-in-law, father-in-law, and Neil all adore me. Jess and Terrence did not have a similar path. They had been on and off since they were 19 or 20, with Terrence never really wanting to commit. During one of their breaks, Terrence got a FWB pregnant and now has an 11-year-old son. This has always been a sore subject with Jess due to her fertility struggles. Fibroids. When they finally got back together, she pressed him for marriage until he relented and gave her a shut-up ring. They went to the courthouse on a random Tuesday, then had dinner at Red Lobster afterwards and went back to work the next day. Not trying to be sharp, just relaying the facts. They now live in a 2BR apartment in a costly city while working hourly jobs. They aren't minimum wage or anything, but constantly need OT to make ends meet. This has led her to resent me over the years. She thinks everything has come easily to me and has let that fester. There was a time a few years ago at a gathering where she got drunk and got into an argument with Terrence. I think her attitude that night stemmed from seeing me with my infant daughter. To hurt him, she blurted out that she married the wrong brother. Everyone was shocked. I wasn't. She just said the quiet part out loud and revealed what I already knew. So, I poked her a little and said, "Really? Which one? That's kind of gross since both were minors when you met them." Context: Kevin and Terrence also have a younger brother, Tim. Boy, did she fly off the handle after that. To this day, she claims to have no memory of that night. Anyway, now I know there is a new reason why she resents me. Unfortunately, Terrence and Jess had fertility issues for several years before finally having their son a couple of weeks ago. Prior to this, Jess was very odd towards us when I was pregnant with our daughter. The best way to describe it is hot and cold. One minute she pretended like she didn't care while we were talking about it at family gatherings. The next she was volunteering to throw the baby shower. I gave a firm no to that. We both assumed the behavior was because of their fertility issues and didn't think too much of it. But the strangest thing she did was almost demand to know what we were naming our daughter before we announced it. She asked us constantly after our gender reveal and got visibly annoyed when we just laughed her off and said it was a secret. We couldn't understand why the hell she cared so much as she was not expecting at this time. Regardless, we didn't share the name with anyone. When our daughter was born and her name was finally announced, Jess was kind of obsessed with it. I don't know how to explain it. She just kept going on and on about how beautiful and unique it was. To this day, she comments about how different it is. The name we chose is a pretty common Welsh name, which wouldn't be all that different except for the fact that we are African American, LOL. I've always gravitated towards names from different regions and found and fell in love with the name years ago and never shared it with anyone before Kevin. Fast forward to both of us being pregnant at the same time. Jess's odd behavior continued towards me, but this time it was more blatant. Snarky comments under the guise of jokes about how big I was going to get with 2 babies and that my body would never snap back like it did after our daughter. She even accused us of getting pregnant on purpose after she announced her own pregnancy. Even though the whole family knew we were actively trying and, at the time of her announcement, I was already a few weeks along and didn't know. One thing about me, introvert or not, I'm no pushover and will stand up for myself. But I chose to ignore Jess because I knew that would get to her more than confronting her would, since she seems to thrive off drama. Jess was obviously much further along than we are. However, we did have our gender reveal prior to Jess giving birth, and right on cue the baby name interrogation started again. Because they decided not to find out the gender of their baby in advance. Jess kept hounding us for both of the names we had already picked out. But again, we declined to answer. After days of this, I got annoyed and asked Kevin if he thought the reason for her insistence was so she could use the name first since she was due first. He kind of chuckled until he realized I was serious and said he didn't think so, but that anything was possible. So I said, "Let's test it." We were due to host my father-in-law's birthday at our house a couple weeks later, and I decided to leave something in the unfinished nursery with a girl and boy name on it and see if Jess went snooping. Because Kevin thought it was silly, he said he would give me $20 if she did it. So I went on to some site where you can order custom name wall decals and put in the names Arya Rose and Sebastian Ali. These are names that we like, but aren't remotely close to what we chose. This will also be our last pregnancy, so even if Jess did use them, we wouldn't care. I didn't complete the order. I got to the final page and then printed it out and hid it in a dresser drawer in the nursery. The party goes off, but because we were busy hosting, we never noticed if Jess disappeared for any extended period of time. When I went into the nursery the next morning, nothing was out of place and the order sheet was still in the exact location. So we both just went meh and forgot about it. I did, however, notice that Jess never asked us about the names again. Then Jess gives birth. We went to the hospital to give our congrats. When we go in and see the baby, I asked what his name was. And man, I cannot properly explain the poop-eating grin that came over Jess's face as she says, Sebastian Ali. I mean, she was really proud of herself, and honestly, it's the most vindictive I have ever seen her look in the years I've known her. But instead of reacting how she was expecting, I performed like I had graduated from Juilliard. Oh my God, that's such a great name. He's so cute. Look at his whittle face. Oh, I just love him so much. Welcome to the world, Sebastian. Auntie is going to spoil you rotten. I mean, I am laying it on thick without an ounce of bother. The range of emotions on Jess's face went from shock to confusion to rage in a span of maybe 17 seconds. Meanwhile, my husband is holding in the laugh of the century. We later say our goodbyes and he gives me a 20 in the elevator while almost crying laughing. All I could say was, like I thought. This was 2 weeks ago, and we haven't seen them since because we wanted to give them time to settle in with the new baby. I have heard from my mother-in-law that Jess doesn't seem as thrilled about motherhood as she thought she would be, considering how long it took them to conceive, but said it might just be baby blues. Obviously, I think she's just disappointed that her petty move didn't have the desired effect on us. I did share this with my sister, and while she laughed initially, she did say it was kind of an a-hole movement. So, am I the a-hole? Update 11 days later. I haven't seen or heard from Jess since that day in the hospital. Terrence also hasn't communicated much with Kevin other than sports talk. However, my mother-in-law has been with them almost every day. She came over yesterday to go over some last-minute things for our baby shower that we are having this Saturday after Halloween. I am not due till late January, but with the holidays and twins tending to arrive early, we just wanted to get it out of the way. Anyway, after finalizing some things, I asked mother-in-law how Terrence and Jess were doing. She sighed and leaned back in her chair and said, "Girl, it's a mess." She goes on a long word vomit that I will have to summarize. Basically, they've been at it since before the baby was born. When they were discussing names, Jess's list only consisted of girl names. When Terrence asked, "What if it's a boy?" Jess was adamant that it wouldn't be, but if it was, they would just use Terrence Jr. This caused an argument because Terrence's 11-year-old was not named after him, and it would be petty to name the second son a junior. Unbeknownst to me, Jess was having severe anxiety over not the name, but the gender of their baby. So much so that she refused to find out early because she was afraid of disappointment and she wanted to enjoy her pregnancy believing she was having a girl. She really wanted a girl. Really wanted a girl. This goes back to mother-in-law, in my opinion. Mother-in-law is the only girl of 4 brothers. She had 3 boys. 2 of her 3 boys, Tim has a 6-year-old, have boys. Then my daughter came along. Mother-in-law actually broke down in tears at our gender reveal. Since the day she was born, mother-in-law has become a little obsessed with her, lol. Not in a bad way. She knows and respects boundaries, but the whole family is aware that my daughter is mother-in-law's favorite person in the world. I think Jess thought that by having a girl, she would get that same attention and affection from mother-in-law, as she has never been Jess's biggest fan. When that didn't happen, something short-circuited in her head, mother-in-law's words, not mine. Before we arrived at the hospital that day, they were still fighting over a name. So I guess when I showed up, she just blurted it out. While I still think it was to hurt me, it seems like it was also because she didn't allow herself to think of anything else because she didn't want a boy. I said in the first post how I noticed her expression. However, I completely failed to notice Terrence's. He was pissed. Jess had never mentioned that name to him prior, and he had no clue where it even came from. He also hated it. He refused to sign off on that, and they left the hospital without a name. In our state, you only have 7 days from birth to register a name. She eventually told Terrence to pick the name himself and that she didn't care anymore. So he did. He swapped out Sebastian for Jordan, but kept Ali, after Michael and Muhammad. LOL. According to mother-in-law, since they've been home, Jess has shut down emotionally. She's been doing all the motherly things, but there's a disconnect there. Mother-in-law said she finally broke down to her a few nights ago that she'll likely never have a daughter due to her age and what it took to get pregnant in the first place. I think that will bring them closer together since mother-in-law never got the daughter she wanted either. I also felt bad hearing that because, regardless of how I feel about her as a person, I do have a heart and would never want to punch down on her if she's in the throes of PPD. Jess still hasn't admitted to snooping, so I haven't admitted to setting her up. A few comments said I should never confess, but I think I will at some point, mainly because I don't care, LOL. I am more than willing to burn a bridge while I am still standing on it. But now simply isn't the time. The following week after Jess and Terrence's baby was born, I focused on my life and on preparing for our baby shower. With twins on the way, everything had to be in place before the holiday season started. Kevin and I were excited, but I knew deep down that something was brewing between Jess and Terrence. We hadn't heard from them directly, and their absence only confirmed that things weren't going well. 2 weeks later, as I folded baby clothes in the nursery, Kevin walked in with his phone in hand, grinning. It was Terrence wanting to vent a little. Kevin put the call on speaker, and I kept folding clothes, pretending to be absorbed. Terrence sounded exhausted. He said Jess had been cold and emotionally distant since they left the hospital, doing only the bare minimum for the baby. She doesn't even look at him properly, Terrence said. She feeds him, changes him, but there's no love there. She's just checked out. As I listened, I exchanged glances with Kevin, who was trying to hold back laughter. But for the first time, I didn't feel as satisfied as before. As much as Jess was unbearable and competitive, hearing that she was going through a breakdown made me feel uneasy. Still, I said nothing and let Terrence continue. He explained that the fights between him and Jess had escalated. After controlling every aspect of the pregnancy, she couldn't handle the fact that they had a boy and not the girl she had so desperately wanted. She spent months convincing herself it was a girl, he said. And when it wasn't, something snapped. He admitted he had tried suggesting therapy, but Jess refused, insisting that she was just tired and things would get better with time. Terrence seemed lost, and for the first time I felt a little sorry for him. Jess's childish rivalry with me had morphed into an internal battle she couldn't win. Then Terrence said something that caught me off guard. He revealed that during one of their fights, Jess admitted she hated the name Jordan Ali. She confessed that she only wanted to use Sebastian Ali to hurt me, as if stealing the name was some kind of petty victory. She didn't even think about what it would mean for her son, Terrence said bitterly. All she cared about was getting back at you. When the call ended, Kevin and I exchanged knowing looks. I didn't have to say anything. He knew exactly what I was thinking. The satisfaction I had felt earlier was starting to wear off. This situation wasn't over yet, and I knew it. At our baby shower, Jess and Terrence showed up unexpectedly. I was shocked. They were the last people I thought would attend. Jess entered the house holding the baby like a bag of groceries with an exhausted expression. The room fell silent for a moment before everyone resumed their conversations, pretending nothing was wrong. But the tension was palpable. Throughout the party, I kept my distance, watching Jess. There was something unsettling about the way she moved, as if she was detached from everything around her. Kevin chatted with Terrence about sports, pretending nothing was amiss, while my mother-in-law pulled me aside, worried. She's like this all the time, she whispered. I don't know how much more she can take. I wanted to feel empathy. I really did, but a part of me, a vindictive, prideful part, couldn't forget all the times Jess had tried to tear me down. A voice inside me whispered, she's just reaping what she sowed. So, I decided to be kind, overly kind. I grabbed a tray of appetizers and approached Jess. Do you want something? You must be tired with the baby and everything. She gave me a cold, tired look. No thanks, she muttered. But I wasn't about to let her off that easily. You know, I said, smiling sweetly, Jordan is a beautiful name. Terrence made such a great choice. It suits him perfectly. Jess's eyes narrowed, and I saw the flicker of rage spark in them. She knew I was playing the same game she had, only now she was the one losing and I was winning. A week later, my mother-in-law called with unexpected news. Jess had left. She packed her things and moved in with her parents, leaving Terrence alone with the baby. My mother-in-law was frantic, trying to make sense of what happened, but I knew exactly what had occurred. Jess finally realized she had lost. Her life had revolved around competing with me, and when her most spiteful plan failed, she completely broke down. Terrence called Kevin a few nights later, desperate for advice. He was overwhelmed, trying to care for the baby on his own, and worried about Jess's mental state. Kevin shook his head as he listened, and when the call ended, he said, "I don't think she was ever ready to be a mother." For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt, but it quickly faded. Jess had dug her own grave. She spent years trying to bring me down, and in the end, her own bitterness consumed her. I did nothing but defend myself. Saving her from herself would have been impossible. And then, as if the universe wanted to put the final nail in the coffin, I received a text from Jess. Just one sentence, "You won." I deleted the message without replying. There was no need. I already knew. The morning after the baby shower, I woke up feeling different. Something inside me told me it was time to close this chapter for good. I was tired of Jess dragging me into her petty games, of watching her envy poison every special moment in my life. She had lost, and I knew the war was practically over. But some stories need a clear ending, and I was going to make sure she understood once and for all that messing with me was no longer an option. Kevin noticed the look on my face over breakfast. "What are you planning to do?" he asked, familiar with that expression. I shrugged with a calm smile. "Nothing illegal. I just need to set things straight." He chuckled. "As long as you don't end up in jail, do whatever you need to." With that, I made a simple but effective decision. I was going to confront Jess in person. No texts, no calls. It was time to look her in the eye and close this chapter the way only I could. I dressed casually but stylishly, knowing that appearance is one of the most powerful weapons, especially when dealing with someone like Jess. Then I drove to her parents' house unannounced. When she opened the door and saw me standing there, her face flickered with a series of emotions: surprise, discomfort, and finally her familiar disdain. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice exhausted. I could hear the baby crying in the background, and the house was a mess. "Perfect. I came to talk," I said, my tone calm but firm. "We can do it here or we can go somewhere private. Your call." She hesitated for a moment but eventually opened the door wider, letting me in. I shut the door behind me with a soft click and got straight to the point. "Listen, Jess," I began, crossing my arms. "You tried. I get it. It was a decent attempt. But it's over." She glared at me, but I didn't give her the chance to respond. "You've spent years competing with me, trying to tear me down, stealing moments that were never yours to take. And in the end, all you've done is ruin yourself. Now you're here with a baby you can't even connect with and a life you don't even want. And guess what? I don't feel sorry for you." I could see the rage boiling just beneath the surface, but she was still trying to maintain her composure. "Do you think this is fun for you?" she hissed. "Coming here to rub it in my face that you have everything I ever wanted?" I smiled, not cruelly but coldly. "This isn't about what I have, Jess. It's about what you lost. And it wasn't material things. It was control. You lost control of your own life because of a childish obsession with me. And now you have nothing." She opened her mouth to respond, but I raised my hand, cutting her off. "Listen closely because I won't say this again. I didn't come here to fight. I came to end this. What you think or do from now on doesn't matter because I don't play your game. I never did. You played it alone and you lost alone." For a moment, she was completely silent. Then something unexpected happened. She broke. The tears she'd been holding back for weeks finally spilled over, and she sank onto the couch as if all the strength had drained out of her. "I just wanted things to be different," she whispered, more to herself than to me. "I know," I said, softening my tone slightly, though I kept my firmness. But the way you handled it only destroyed the good things you still had. And now you have to live with that. I stood up and walked toward the door. Before leaving, I gave her one last message. This isn't about winning or losing, Jess. It's about moving on. And that's what I'm going to do. I suggest you do the same. Without waiting for a response, I left and closed the door behind me. On the drive home, a sense of relief washed over me. It wasn't an explosive victory full of fireworks and revenge. It was the kind of revenge that's most powerful. Knowing I had closed this chapter on my terms, and from now on her life would no longer affect mine. A few weeks later, I heard from my mother-in-law that Jess and Terrence had started couples therapy. Jess was still distant, but she'd finally accepted that she wouldn't have the daughter she dreamed of. She seemed to be making an effort to bond with the baby. I didn't wish her any harm. There was no need. Life had already dealt her all the lessons she needed, even if it would take years for her to fully learn them. Meanwhile, Kevin and I moved on with our lives. Our baby shower was a success, and the birth of our twins brought a joy beyond words. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. Jess was just a closed chapter, a reminder that the best revenge is living well and never looking back. And as for me, I was ready to write the next chapter of my life. This time, with no one trying to steal the pages. Now on to the next story. Story 6. My name's Adrian. I'm 32, and I can tell you right now, money doesn't magically shield you from family drama. I've been working since I was 18, building my own business from scratch after walking away from college. Back then, my parents thought I was making the dumbest mistake of my life. You'll never amount to anything without a degree, my mom told me while stirring her coffee like she was auditioning for a soap opera. My dad just grunted in agreement, which was his usual way of dismissing anything I said. They didn't know I had already started my first online venture, a niche e-commerce store that would eventually grow into a series of companies generating millions a year. But back then, all they saw was a reckless, naive kid who didn't want to work hard. We were never a close family. My parents were the type who measured worth by appearances and status. My older sister, Lily, was their pride and joy, a corporate lawyer with a pristine LinkedIn profile, luxury handbags for every season, and the kind of cold, calculated confidence that could make a room go quiet. She was the success story they paraded in front of family friends. I was the cautionary tale. Anytime I came over for dinner, they'd manage to slip in jabs, disguised as concern. "Still doing that little internet thing?" my dad would ask, chuckling as if it were a phase I'd outgrow, like collecting comic books. Lily would smile politely and say, "You know, it's never too late to get a real job." For years, I let it slide. I figured there was no point in defending myself. They wouldn't believe me anyway. And truthfully, I was busy. Building a business from the ground up takes everything you have, and I didn't have the energy to prove myself to people who had already decided I was a disappointment. So I kept my life quiet. I didn't brag about my earnings. I didn't mention that I'd bought my own house in cash by 27, or that I could afford to travel anywhere in the world on a whim. I just smiled through the family dinners, endured the comments, and went home to the life they assumed I didn't have. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday evening. I'd stopped by my parents' house after my mom texted me asking if I could help with something. When I got there, my dad was in the living room pacing. Lily was sitting on the couch with a glass of wine, smirking like she already knew I was in trouble. My mom stood by the fireplace, arms crossed as if she were about to announce some devastating news. "Adrian," my dad started, "we've been talking. You're 32 years old, and it's clear this online nonsense isn't going anywhere. You've had enough time to figure your life out, but you're still wasting your potential." I felt my jaw tighten. "What exactly are you getting at?" He stopped pacing and pointed toward the door. "You've been living in that apartment for years, and you're still here asking for help with small things. We can't keep enabling you." I blinked, confused. "Enabling me? I've never asked you for money. Not once." Lily let out a short laugh. "Oh, come on, Adrian. You've been coasting. You think anyone believes you're making a living off your little business? It's sad, honestly." My mom stepped in, voice sharp. "We've decided it's time for you to stand on your own 2 feet for real. No more coming here when you need help. No more expecting us to bail you out. I stared at them, stunned. I don't need you to bail me out. I'm doing just fine. My dad's voice rose. If you're doing so fine, then you can prove it by surviving without our help at all. In fact, you can leave now. Go live in the streets if you have to. Maybe that will wake you up. The room went quiet except for the rain hitting the windows. I glanced at Lily, who was sipping her wine like she was watching a show she'd been waiting all week to see. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. They thought they were delivering some harsh reality check. They thought I'd beg, maybe promise to do better or get a real job. They had no idea I could buy their house 3 times over without touching my savings. I picked up my jacket from the chair and slipped it on. All right, I said softly, almost smiling. If that's what you want. My mom opened her mouth, probably to add one more dig, but I didn't give her the chance. I walked out, shutting the door behind me. As I got into my car, a black sedan that they assumed was a used model I'd barely been able to afford, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was almost amused because I knew something they didn't, something they were going to find out in a way they'd never forget. And as the rain poured harder, I drove off into the night, already knowing that 3 weeks from now, their entire view of me and of themselves was going to shatter. The first week after they threw me out was strangely quiet. Not emotionally quiet. I had plenty of thoughts running laps in my head, but quiet in the sense that there were no calls, no texts, no follow-up from them. I didn't expect an apology, but some part of me had thought maybe they'd at least check if I was okay. Nothing. It was as if I'd been erased from the family roster entirely. I spent those days working from my home office, though home office doesn't quite do it justice. The place was a modern penthouse overlooking the city with floor-to-ceiling windows and a study lined with leather-bound books I'd collected over the years. I could sit at my desk and see the skyline stretching into the horizon, a constant reminder of just how far I'd come from the kid they once called a failure. By the second week, I started hearing things from mutual acquaintances. Subtle hints that my parents and Lily were concerned about me. Not concerned as in worried for my well-being, but concerned as in shaking their heads and telling people I'd finally hit rock bottom. My mother, it seemed, had told her church friends that I was living out of my car now because my little internet project collapsed. Lily had apparently told one of my old high school friends that I was finally learning life's lessons the hard way. They weren't just painting me as a failure. They were actively building the narrative. One night, I got a text from my cousin Jacob, one of the few family members who had always treated me like an equal. Jacob, hey man, I overheard something tonight. You okay? Me, define okay. Jacob, your mom was telling people at dinner that you're basically homeless. She said, you'll probably come crawling back soon. Me, interesting. Jacob, also, Lily made a joke about maybe letting you do odd jobs for her firm when you're desperate enough. She said, you'd look good fetching coffee. I stared at that last message for a while, letting the words sink in. It wasn't surprising. Lily had been making those kinds of digs for years, but hearing it now, after they had already kicked me out, hit differently. It was like watching someone set fire to a bridge you had already decided never to cross again just to make sure it was gone. The third week rolled around and I decided to make an appearance at my parents' Sunday dinner. Not as a guest, I wasn't invited, but as an observer. Jacob had mentioned that these dinners had become a weekly ritual ever since I left. I pulled up in my car. This time my other car, the one they didn't know I owned. A sleek silver coupe that turned heads without even trying. I parked a few houses down so they wouldn't see me arrive. From the sidewalk, I could see them through the dining room window. My parents at the head of the table, Lily beside them, all smiles. The conversation seemed animated. Glasses of wine raised, plates full. I could imagine the script. Lily talking about her latest case, my parents beaming, and then right on cue, a mention of how ungrateful I'd been, how I'd wasted my potential. I wasn't angry anymore. No, what I felt was something colder, something sharper. This wasn't just about me leaving their house. This was about the fact that they were using me as a cautionary tale to make themselves look better. They were rewriting my life into a failure story because it made them feel righteous and in control. 2 days later, I got a call from my mom, not to reconcile, but to ask for a favor. Her tone was light, almost mocking. "Adrian, darling, your father and I are going to need your help moving some old furniture next weekend. Since you've got nothing else going on, you should have the time." I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. "Sorry, I'm busy." She sighed like I was being difficult on purpose. "Busy with what?" "Work." She let out a small, knowing laugh. "Of course, your business. Well, try to make time for family, okay? You might need us someday." That was the moment I realized just how deep their condescension ran. They genuinely believed they were the safety net I'd fall into when life inevitably crushed me. They couldn't even fathom the possibility that I didn't need them, hadn't needed them in years. And yet, even as they belittled me, a small part of me decided to play along just a little longer. Because if I revealed everything now, the impact wouldn't be nearly as satisfying as it could be. No, I'd let them stack the insults, pile on the false narratives, dig themselves deeper into this hole they were building. Because when the truth finally came out, I wanted it to hit them so hard they'd never recover from the embarrassment. And that moment was coming much sooner than they thought. By the time the 4th week hit, I'd settled into a kind of detached calm about the whole situation. I knew exactly where I stood with them now, and I wasn't losing sleep over it. But just when I thought I'd seen the worst of their pettiness, they managed to find a new low. It started on a Thursday morning with an email from my bank. Subject line: unusual account activity. Immediate attention required. My first thought was that it might be some phishing scam, but when I logged into my account, I froze. 2 large withdrawals, each over $7,000, had been made from one of my older accounts. The account wasn't one I actively used anymore, but it was still open because it was tied to a joint savings plan my parents had opened for me when I was a teenager. I had meant to close it years ago, but it had slipped my mind. Both withdrawals were marked as in-person transactions, and both were from a branch 2 blocks from my parents' house. At first, I tried to think of a reasonable explanation. Maybe some banking error, maybe identity theft. But when I called the branch and got the details, my stomach dropped. The teller remembered the withdrawal clearly. According to her, my mother had come in, said I'd authorized her to access the funds for a family emergency, and walked out with a cashier's check both times. I don't know what made my hands shake more. The theft itself, or the fact that she'd done it so casually, as if my money was hers to take whenever she pleased. I didn't call her right away. I needed to be calm. And right then, I wasn't. Instead, I called Jacob. "You're not going to believe this," I said, explaining what had happened. There was a long pause. "Adrian, I think I know where that money went." "Where?" He hesitated. "Lily just put a down payment on a new luxury SUV. She was bragging about how it was a gift from the family for all the hard work she does." The words hit me like ice water. It wasn't enough for them to treat me like a failure. They'd actually stolen from me to reward Lily. My mother had literally walked into a bank, emptied my account without permission, and funneled the money straight to the golden child, probably while telling herself it was perfectly justified. That night, I drove to my parents' house. I didn't go inside. I wasn't ready for the confrontation yet, but I parked across the street and just sat there staring at the warmly lit windows. Inside, I could see them in the living room. Lily was holding up a set of car keys and my mom was taking a photo, probably to post online later. My dad was laughing, clapping her on the shoulder like she just won some award. I don't remember how long I sat there, but I do remember the feeling in my chest shifting. Up until now, there'd been some faint lingering thread of loyalty that held me back from going too far. But in that moment, watching them celebrate with my money, that thread snapped clean. Later that week, I got a text from my mom. "Hope you're not upset about the savings account. It was just sitting there and your sister needed help. You'll make more money someday. Family comes first." I stared at that message for a long time. No apology, no acknowledgement that it was theft, just a smug, almost patronizing justification. I didn't reply. I didn't have to because in that moment, something inside me shifted from quiet endurance to cold resolve. This wasn't about proving my success to them anymore. This was about showing them that the bridge they burned wasn't just gone. It had been replaced with a fortress they'd never get near again, and they were about to learn exactly what that meant. After the SUV incident, the air around me felt heavier. Not in the sense that I was collapsing under it, but more like the atmosphere before a storm. I wasn't angry in a hot, impulsive way anymore. It was a quieter kind of weight, the kind that sits in your bones and doesn't let you forget. I didn't tell anyone else about what had happened. Not friends, not colleagues, not even my business partners. I didn't want sympathy. And honestly, part of me was embarrassed that I'd allowed myself to be in a position where they could take from me so easily. I was supposed to be smart, careful, strategic. Yet, I'd left that account open like an unlocked door, and they'd waltzed right through. For the next couple of weeks, I pulled back from everything. I stopped attending certain meetings. I ignored a few social invites. I even skipped a quarterly networking event I never missed just so I wouldn't have to answer questions about my family. I told people I was busy with big projects, but in reality, I was holed up in my penthouse, letting the silence wrap around me. It wasn't that I was depressed, at least not in the way people expect when they hear that word. I still woke up early, still hit the gym every morning, still kept my businesses running smoothly. But something inside me felt raw, almost hollow. Every time I thought about my parents and Lily, it was like replaying a movie where the ending was always the same. Me as the punchline to their inside joke. One night, I sat at my kitchen island with a glass of whiskey, scrolling through old photos on my phone. There was one from 5 years ago. My parents and Lily standing in front of a rented beach house, smiling for the camera while I stood off to the side, half in the frame. That had been the year they'd forgotten to mention that the trip was already planned and fully booked when they invited me. I'd ended up on a couch in the living room while Lily got the master suite. The more I looked at that picture, the more I realized something. This wasn't new. The theft, the lies, the public humiliation. It was just the most recent chapter in a story that had been playing out my entire life. I'd always been the one expected to compromise, to give more than I got, to quietly absorb whatever they dished out. And maybe that's why they were so sure they could take my money and get away with it. They thought I'd sulk for a bit, maybe give them a cold shoulder, but eventually come back for the next Sunday dinner like nothing happened. That's when my thoughts started to shift. Not toward confronting them immediately. I wasn't going to storm over and demand my money back. No, I started thinking about leverage, about timing, about how much sweeter the payoff would be if I didn't just call them out, but dismantled the whole fantasy they built around themselves. The first step was subtle. I had my lawyer quietly start the process of locking down every account, every property, every asset in my name, making sure there wasn't a single weak link left for them to exploit. At the same time, I reached out to a private contact, someone who specialized in gathering financial and legal records that weren't exactly public knowledge. I told him I wanted a full picture of my family's financial situation. Not because I needed the information immediately, but because I had a feeling it would be useful down the road. And while all of that was in motion, I kept my distance. No calls, no texts, no showing up at family events. I wanted them to get used to my absence, to start thinking they'd successfully pushed me out for good. The more comfortable they felt, the more blindsided they'd be later. But that distance had a price. Some nights I'd be sitting in my living room with the city lights stretching out below me, and it would hit me how small my circle had become. My friends didn't ask questions, but they noticed. Jacob tried to check in a few times, but I kept the conversation short. It was easier to stay in my own head than to explain what I was working toward. I knew I was isolating myself and I knew it wasn't healthy, but I also knew it was necessary because when you're planning something this big, you can't afford loose ends. You can't afford to be sloppy. And quietly, in the back of my mind, a date started forming. I didn't circle it on the calendar, didn't write it down anywhere, but I knew when the moment would come, and I knew exactly where they'd be when it happened. The shift wasn't dramatic at first. It was more like turning a dimmer switch. One week I was keeping my head down. The next, I was leaning back into my routines with a precision and focus I hadn't felt in months. I dove into my businesses with a renewed clarity, almost like I'd been coasting before and hadn't realized it. My flagship company had been doing well for years, but there were 2 expansion projects I'd been putting off, one in Europe and one in Southeast Asia. I greenlit both within the same week. That meant hiring new teams, forging partnerships, and locking down multi-million-dollar contracts that would cement our brand globally. And I wasn't just doing it for the revenue, though the numbers were staggering. I was doing it to ensure my influence and reach were undeniable. I wanted my footprint to be so big that when the moment came, there would be no question in anyone's mind about who I was and what I'd built. At the same time, I started networking again, but with intention. Instead of generic business mixers, I attended high-level investor dinners, tech summits, and charity galas. I made sure to be seen in rooms my family could only dream of entering. I shook hands with people who could, with a single phone call, change the trajectory of an entire industry. And I did it quietly. No social media bragging, no press releases, because I wanted this to be something they discover on someone else's lips, not mine. By mid-year, one of my smaller companies, a software startup I'd invested in, had been acquired for 8 figures. My cut alone was enough to buy half the properties in my parents' neighborhood outright. The same week the deal closed, I wired a significant portion into an investment account that was already overflowing. The rest I reinvested into ventures that would keep the growth compounding. But the real power wasn't just in the money. It was in the connections. Over coffee in Manhattan, I met with an influential editor from a national business magazine. We talked shop, and somewhere between the cappuccinos and the check, she floated the idea of doing a feature on self-made entrepreneurs who had been underestimated early on. The irony wasn't lost on me. I didn't confirm anything then, but I kept her card in my wallet. It wasn't time yet. Meanwhile, the reports from my financial contact were trickling in, and the picture they painted of my family's situation was enlightening. My parents' retirement savings were thinner than I thought. Lily, despite her high-paying job, was sitting on a mountain of debt from a mix of bad investments and a taste for luxury she couldn't quite afford. That SUV lease, the down payment they'd stolen from me, barely covered the initial fees, and she'd quietly taken out a second mortgage on her condo last year. It wasn't just satisfying to know. They were vulnerable. And that meant when the time came, the impact of my next moves wouldn't just be emotional. It would be practical, tangible. On the surface, though, I kept my distance. The family still held their Sunday dinners, still spoke about me in the past tense, still fed the narrative that I was finding myself somewhere far from reality. But through mutual acquaintances, I began to hear little cracks forming in their certainty. A friend of Lily's had apparently spotted me at a luxury hotel in Singapore mid-meeting with a group of sharply dressed executives. My mother's hairdresser mentioned that she'd overheard someone talking about a CEO named Adrian closing a massive deal overseas. The rumors were starting to reach them, and though they didn't confront me directly, I could feel the curiosity and unease building. I didn't rush it. Power is best revealed in controlled doses, and I wasn't interested in wasting it on a premature showdown. No, I wanted them to be off balance, second-guessing everything they thought they knew, right up until the day I pulled the rug out from under them completely. And when that day came, it wouldn't just be about proving them wrong. It would be about changing the dynamic forever, about making sure they understood without a shadow of doubt that whatever role they thought they played in my life was over. The thing about revenge is that it's not about speed. It's about precision. You don't just strike the moment you get the chance. You wait until the moment is so perfect, so airtight, that your move can't be undone or dismissed. By now, the information my contact had been gathering was complete. And what I saw on paper confirmed what I'd been suspecting for months. My family's image of stability was mostly smoke and mirrors. My parents were on the brink of needing to downsize, but refused to admit it publicly. Lily's financial situation was worse than I'd thought. Maxed out credit cards, high-interest loans, and a lease on that SUV she could barely keep up with. She had even started skipping payments on her second mortgage. One piece of information, however, caught my attention more than anything else. Buried in my father's financial records was a note about an early investment in a small property development company, one that had been quietly circling the drain for the past year. The kicker: my father had personally guaranteed a loan for the company. If it went under, he'd be on the hook for the full amount, well into 6 figures. And judging by the reports, it was about 3 months from collapse. That was the moment I knew how to set the stage. I didn't need to destroy them financially. That would make me look vindictive. No, what I needed to do was let them walk right into a situation where their arrogance and assumptions would undo them, and I'd be there in a position they could never have imagined. Around the same time, I got a call from the business magazine editor I'd met in Manhattan months earlier. She was moving forward with her Underestimated Entrepreneurs feature and wanted me to be the centerpiece. Not just a small write-up, a multi-page spread with professional photos, my full story, and an emphasis on the early days when people told me I'd never make it. I agreed immediately but gave her one condition. The release date had to align with a certain month. The same month my father's failing investment was due to implode. As all this was falling into place, an unexpected opportunity landed in my lap. A real estate investment firm I'd done business with before reached out with an offer. They were acquiring distressed assets from smaller developers and needed an infusion of capital from someone they trusted. I'd been one of their top investors in the past, so they were offering me first choice on the deals. When they sent over the list of properties, I almost laughed. Sitting there in the portfolio, highlighted in red as high risk, was a block of partially developed townhomes owned by none other than my father's struggling property company. I didn't commit right away. I asked questions, reviewed the contracts, and quietly positioned myself so that if the company defaulted, as the report suggested it would, I could acquire the entire project through the investment firm at a fraction of its value. That meant not only would my father's company lose the project, but I'd own it without ever having to deal with him directly. And the best part? On paper, it would look like nothing more than a smart business move on my part. No direct attack, no traceable vendetta. While those gears were turning, I kept my distance from the family, but I made sure my name kept floating into their conversations. Jacob mentioned to me that my mom had asked him if I'd gotten lucky with something because she'd heard I'd been flying first class internationally. Lily had apparently asked a mutual acquaintance if I was actually doing well or just pretending for appearances. I could feel their curiosity gnawing at them, and I knew that curiosity would turn to shock soon enough. I wasn't just getting into a powerful position. I was about to control the board they didn't even realize we were playing on. And when the moment came to make my move, it would be public, undeniable, and perfectly timed to land when they needed me most. When the month finally arrived, everything I'd been putting in place over the past half year was lined up like dominoes, ready to fall in sequence. All I had to do was tap the first one. The business magazine feature hit newsstands on the first Monday of the month. My face was on the cover. Polished suit, skyline backdrop, headline in bold letters, "From Doubt to Dominance." The self-made visionary who proved everyone wrong. The article didn't name my family directly, but it didn't have to. The narrative was clear. I had been told I'd never succeed, had been underestimated by those closest to me, and had quietly built an empire worth tens of millions. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Within hours, the piece was circulating online, shared across social media, business groups, and even LinkedIn circles my sister frequented. That same day, my phone buzzed nonstop. Colleagues, old friends, even distant acquaintances were congratulating me. And right on cue, I got the text I'd been expecting from my mother. "Adrian, we saw the magazine. We had no idea things had gotten this big for you. We're proud of you." Proud? The words sat in my mind like a bitter pill. After years of dismissal, after stealing from me, now they were proud. I didn't reply. 2 weeks later, my father's property development company officially defaulted on its loan. The bank moved quickly, and the real estate investment firm I'd partnered with swept in to acquire the project at a steep discount. As planned, my capital bought me controlling ownership of the entire development. On paper, it was just another smart acquisition. In reality, it was me holding the deed to my father's single biggest asset without him even knowing. I waited 3 days before the next step. Then I had my assistant arrange a meeting with my parents and Lily at a neutral location, a high-end restaurant downtown. The invitation came under the guise of discussing a business opportunity. And given their sudden shift in tone after the magazine feature, they were eager to accept. When they arrived, they were all smiles. My mother hugged me for the first time in years. My father shook my hand like we were old business partners. Lily complimented my suit, her voice dripping with a politeness I'd never heard from her before. We ordered dinner, exchanged small talk, and then, halfway through the main course, I slid a folder across the table. Inside was the ownership document for the development they'd been clinging to as their big investment. My father's smile faltered as he read it. This is our property, he said slowly. Correction, I said, my voice calm. It was your property. It's mine now. They stared at me in stunned silence. I didn't raise my voice, didn't gloat, just laid out the facts. Their company had defaulted. The bank had offloaded the project. I'd bought it legally at a fair price through an established firm. I explained it the way a surgeon might describe a clean-cut, precise, unemotional final. My mother's cheeks flushed red. Adrian, how could you? How could I? I cut in, my tone sharpening just slightly. The same way you walked into my bank account and took my money without permission. The same way you gave it to Lily like it was yours to give. The same way you kicked me out of your house and told people I was homeless. I just learned from the best. Lily's jaw tightened, but she didn't speak. My father sat back in his chair, eyes darting between the papers and my face. For the first time, he looked small to me, not in size but in presence. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. The difference between you and me is that I didn't have to lie or steal to make this happen. I played the long game, and now when this development turns a profit, and it will, not a cent will have your name on it. The table was silent except for the clink of cutlery from nearby diners. They didn't argue. They didn't apologize. They just sat there, the weight of what had happened settling over them like a heavy fog. I finished my meal in silence, paid the bill, and stood. Enjoy your evening, I said, my tone polite, almost casual. Oh, and don't worry about the staff at the development site. I've already told them the change in ownership won't affect their jobs. Just yours. And with that, I walked out, leaving them sitting in the warm glow of the restaurant's chandeliers, the reality of their new position in my world settling in like a cold wind. The fallout came faster than I expected. 3 days after that dinner, I got a call from Jacob. His voice was low, like he wasn't sure whether to sound concerned or impressed. Your parents are losing it, he said. Your dad hasn't left the house in 2 days. Mom's been calling around trying to fix things, but everyone she talks to already knows you own the property. And well, people are talking. It turned out the story had spread beyond the family circle. My father's failed investment wasn't just a quiet embarrassment. It was public knowledge in their social sphere. The same people they used to boast to at dinner parties now whispered about how their reckless son had somehow outmaneuvered them in business. I didn't have to lift a finger to make that happen. People love a twist, and this one was too juicy to keep quiet. Lily didn't fare much better. Her SUV lease was up for renewal, and without my parents covering her emergencies anymore, she had to downgrade to something modest. For someone whose image was built on luxury, that was a social death sentence. I later heard she'd quietly put her condo up for sale, trying to keep ahead of her debts. My parents reached out twice in the weeks after. The first time was a text from my mom. Can we talk? We're still family. I ignored it. The second time was a voicemail from my dad. His tone strained. We need to find a way forward. You can't just cut us off like this. I deleted it without listening to the end. The thing is, I hadn't cut them off out of anger. I'd simply recognized that there was nothing left to salvage. They'd made it clear who they were when they stole from me, lied about me, and celebrated my supposed downfall. I just responded in kind, except I did it without losing my integrity. Months later, the development project began to turn a profit. The townhomes sold faster than projected, and my share of the returns was more than enough to make the theft they'd committed feel like a rounding error. Sometimes I drive past the completed site, watching families move into the homes, kids running around the freshly paved streets. It was mine now, built from their arrogance and my patience. I never saw them at Sunday dinners again. In fact, I never saw them at all. The occasional rumor trickled back through Jacob. How my parents had sold their vacation property, how Lily had taken on extra cases at work to keep afloat, but they were just pieces of a life that no longer touched mine. The last time I heard from my mother was in a short, almost brittle email. You've changed. I read it twice, then closed my laptop. She was wrong. I hadn't changed. I'd simply stopped playing the role they wrote for me. And I realized, as I looked out over the city from my penthouse balcony that night, that was the real victory. Not the money, not the property, but the fact that they finally understood I didn't need them, their approval, or their version of who I was supposed to be. The final time I thought about it, I smiled to myself and said out loud, just once for my own satisfaction, I didn't just live in the streets. I bought the whole block. Now on to the next story. Story 7. You ever sit through an entire family event pretending not to exist? Smiling while everyone claps for someone else's success. Knowing deep down no one in that room even sees you? I've done that more times than I can count. But last Saturday, something in me snapped. And when I took the mic, I didn't just speak. I unloaded 30 years of silence in front of everyone who ignored me. I'm James. I'm 29. And up until last Saturday, I thought I had finally come to terms with the way my family sees me. I thought I'd made peace with the fact that in every photo on my mom's wall, I'm either cropped out or conveniently forgotten. I thought I'd grown thick enough skin that their little jabs at family dinners no longer got under it. Turns out I was wrong. Very wrong. Let me back up a little. Growing up, it was obvious my older brother, Eric, was the favorite. I'm not talking about the usual he's older, so he gets to do more stuff. I mean, from the time I was old enough to form memories, I remember Mom beaming at him for the smallest achievements while barely glancing at mine. Eric scored a goal in soccer. There was a cake, balloons, and a framed photo in the living room for weeks. I won first place in the regional science fair. I got a "That's nice, sweetie," and she kept scrolling on her phone. Dad wasn't really in the picture. He left when I was around 6. And that's a whole other can of worms I won't open right now. The important part is after he left, Mom raised us alone. Or more accurately, she raised Eric. I was just there. A quiet, awkward presence at the edge of the family dynamic. Like a cousin who overstayed his welcome. I tried. I really did. I studied hard, stayed out of trouble, and did what I thought she wanted, hoping she'd one day see me. But no matter what I did, it was like shouting into a void. Eric, he could do no wrong. Even when he did do wrong, like getting caught drunk driving in college, it somehow became an endearing anecdote. Boys will be boys. My aunts would chuckle at every Thanksgiving. Eric's always had a wild streak. I was the one who bailed him out, by the way. Paid his fine with my savings and never got a thank you. Not once. Fast forward to last weekend. Mom's retirement party. She'd been a public school teacher for 35 years. A whole community center was rented out. Caterers, decorations, slideshow of her life, the whole deal. Eric was naturally the master of ceremonies. And I, despite being the one who organized the logistics behind the scenes, booked the caterers, set up the slideshow, arranged the guest list, was just another attendee. No mention of me in the speech introductions. No thanks. But I was used to it. I've been used to it for years. So I smiled, sat near the back, and clapped along like everyone else. Then came the speech. Eric took the mic with that confident swagger he always had, the kind that only comes from being told you're special every day of your life. He talked about Mom's hard work, her dedication, her sacrifices. All true. And then he said, with this nostalgic little chuckle, "Mom, thank you for raising me alone. You gave me everything. You raised me to be who I am today." The room chuckled along. Us and nods. But Mom laughed. Not a soft, modest giggle. No, it was a deep, genuine laugh. Like he'd told the world's funniest joke. She leaned toward the mic, took it from him and said, "Well, he was the only one worth raising." I swear for a full second, my heart stopped. And then my aunts, my mom's sisters, nodded like it was some obvious truth they'd always believed. One of them even whispered loud enough for the table around her to hear. He really was such a blessing. James was always just there. It felt like someone had cracked a window open in a blizzard. That sharp sting in your lungs, that feeling of air slicing through your ribs. I sat there frozen, every cell in my body burning. I could have stayed silent. I could have let it slide like I always did. But something in me, maybe pride, maybe pain, maybe years of being invisible, snapped. I stood up slowly. I could feel the heads turning before I even said a word. My hands were shaking, not with nerves, but with something heavier, a weight that had built up for almost 30 years. I walked to the front. I didn't plan to take the mic. I didn't plan to say anything, but Eric looked confused, and Mom looked annoyed, as if I was interrupting something that wasn't mine to be part of. The MC, one of Mom's coworkers, held the mic toward me with a polite smile. I took it, and then I looked out at the room. Rows and rows of people who only ever knew the version of our family that Mom told them. Coworkers, cousins, neighbors, people I hadn't seen in years. People who had no idea what I was about to say. I started with something simple. Hi, I'm James. For those of you who don't know, I'm Elaine's other son. A few people laughed lightly, thinking I was making a joke. I wasn't. I took a breath. I wasn't planning on speaking today. I thought this was her moment. But then I heard something that I think deserves a little clarity. The room quieted. One of the aunts tried to clear her throat loudly, like a warning. Mom's smile had tightened into something brittle. She raised him alone. Sure, I continued. She put in the hours, the work, the late nights, the parent-teacher meetings. But just so everyone's clear, she had 2 kids. 2 boys. One got the spotlight, the attention, the support, and the other one got, well, a chance to finally speak at a microphone because no one thought he ever would. Eric was frozen, completely still. Mom crossed her arms, lips pressed in a thin line. I could see her scanning the crowd, worried. Not for me, but for appearances. I wanted to stop. I really did. But something in me needed to be heard. I needed someone, anyone, in that room to know what it had been like. So I kept going. I talked about the missed birthdays, the parent-teacher conferences she skipped, the art show she never came to, the soccer games I sat through alone. I brought up how she smiled at Eric's mugshot like it was a prank photo while I got grounded for getting a B in math. People were silent now, utterly still. I could feel the momentum building inside me like a wave, like every suppressed word I'd swallowed over the years was clawing its way out at once. My voice started to shake, not because I was afraid, but because I wasn't anymore. I was angry. I was tired. And then I said it. I didn't get raised. I got ignored. You could have heard a pin drop. And just as I was about to say what happened the day Dad left, just as I was about to share that secret, the one Mom made sure never left our house, I locked eyes with her. She knew what was coming. Her face turned pale. Her lips opened slightly. And then she shook her head just once. A small, deliberate gesture, barely noticeable to anyone else, but to me it was deafening. It was the same look she gave me the day Dad walked out. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was 6. Eric was 10. Mom was standing in the doorway of the kitchen, arms folded, jaw clenched, and Dad had his suitcase in one hand and car keys in the other. He didn't even look at me. He hugged Eric, ruffled his hair, and told him, "Be the man of the house now." Then he glanced at me, blinked like he forgot I was there, and turned away. I cried. Not loudly, just a small whimper, the kind a kid lets out when they're too confused to really understand what's happening. I looked up at Mom, hoping for a hug, a hand, anything. But instead, she looked down at me and said, "He was never really yours. Don't act like you lost something." I hadn't thought about that moment in years. I buried it deep, deeper than anything else. But that look she just gave me, it dragged it all back to the surface like a hook in my chest. So I tightened my grip on the mic. "I was 6, I said, voice trembling but firm. "And I remember exactly what you said when he left. You told me I didn't lose anything, that he was never mine. And I believed you. I figured if even you thought I didn't matter to him, then maybe I didn't matter at all." Gasps, real ones this time, from a few of Mom's coworkers, a couple cousins. Aunt Louise even put her hand to her mouth. "I spent years thinking I was the problem," I continued, "that I wasn't good enough or smart enough or interesting enough to deserve the same love Eric got. And I didn't say anything. Not when you forgot my birthday 3 years in a row. Not when you called me ungrateful for asking why Eric's college was fully paid for, but I had to take out loans. Not even when you told people I moved away to be selfish, when in reality I left because this house, this family, made me feel like I didn't exist." Eric finally stirred. He stood, took one cautious step toward me. James, come on, man. You're blowing this out of proportion. This isn't the time. I turned to him, slow and calm. Isn't the time? When is the time, Eric? When you're getting praised for being the golden child again. When everyone's passing around photo albums where I'm literally cut out of group pictures. You had 30 years of speeches. 30 years of being the only one worth raising. I get 10 minutes. He sat down hard. I scanned the room. People were squirming. Guests who once smiled politely now looked stunned, unsure whether to stand and leave or stay frozen in their chairs. One of Mom's friends tried to smile at me encouragingly, like I just opened up about something brave. She clearly didn't get it. This isn't about jealousy, I said, before anyone could try to twist it into that. This isn't about me wanting a spotlight or a trophy. It's about the fact that a mother of two raised one son and told the other one every day in 100 subtle ways that he didn't measure up, that he wasn't wanted, that she regretted him. That got her attention. Mom's mouth tightened. Her jaw shifted. And for a moment, just a moment, I thought she might actually say something. Maybe an apology. Maybe a justification. Instead, she stood up slowly, took a few steps toward me and said, "You have no idea how hard it was." She didn't say it with anger. She said it like I was a child who couldn't possibly understand. Like this was her moment of pain now. "I had to keep the house together," she went on. "I had to work 2 jobs. Your father left me with nothing. I did what I had to do. I never blamed you for the struggle," I replied. "I blamed you for pretending like I wasn't part of it. For erasing me from the narrative. For acting like he was the only one who mattered. I gave you everything I could," she snapped. "No," I said. "You gave Eric everything. You gave me leftovers. You gave me silence." We stared at each other. The room was holding its breath. Then she dropped it. The mask, that thin layer of politeness, the one she always wore in public, shattered. Her eyes narrowed. "You always were so dramatic," she said with a disgusted little shake of her head. "Always playing the victim. Poor James. So unloved, so unappreciated. That's why no one connects with you. That's why you've never had a real relationship. That's why even your father don't." I cut her off. My voice was low, but deadly sharp. "Don't you dare bring him into this. You let him leave me behind. You watched him hug one son and ignore the other, and you agreed with it." Another pause. A deeper silence now. One that didn't just fill the room, but felt like it sunk into the floor, the walls, the very air itself. And in that moment, I realized something. She wasn't shocked that I said any of this. She wasn't ashamed. She was annoyed. I had disrupted her narrative, her perfect retirement send-off, her golden boy tribute, her look how strong I was as a single mom story. But she wasn't the only one with a story. I looked back out at the guests, at the people who'd come to celebrate a woman they thought they knew. At Eric, still slouched in his chair, pale and quiet. And I said, "You want to thank her for raising you alone, Eric? Fine, thank her. But don't pretend I wasn't there. Don't let her pretend that this was some noble sacrifice where she did her best with what she had. Because what she had was 2 sons. She just chose one." I turned to leave, and that's when I heard it. A slow, hesitant clap, followed by another, then a third. It wasn't a standing ovation. It wasn't even half the room, but a few people, just a few, started clapping. Some awkwardly, some genuinely. One of Mom's coworkers, a man I barely recognized, gave me a small nod as I passed. But it wasn't about the applause. It was about finally being seen. And just as I reached the double doors at the back of the community center, someone called out my name. It wasn't Mom. It wasn't Eric. It was someone I never expected. It was Aunt Denise. Now, you have to understand, Aunt Denise was the quiet one. She was always there at holidays, always brought the same sweet potato casserole, always smiled politely, and stayed out of the drama. In our family, staying quiet wasn't just a trait. It was a survival strategy, and Denise had mastered it. I honestly don't think I'd ever heard her raise her voice once in nearly 3 decades. So when she stood up, her chair scraping sharply against the floor, and said, "James, wait," Every head turned. I paused in the doorway. I didn't want to. Everything in me was screaming to keep walking, get in my car, and never look back. But something in her voice, it wasn't pity. It wasn't condescension. It was something else. I turned. She was walking toward me slowly, like even she couldn't believe what she was doing. Her eyes flicked to Mom, who looked almost amused for a second, like she was waiting for Denise to scold me, to put me back in my place. But Denise didn't look at her again. She looked at me, and then she did something no one else had done that entire day, maybe my whole life. She hugged me, not a half-hearted side hug, not a forced good to see you pat on the back. A real, full two-arm hug. She pulled me in like she hadn't seen me in years and didn't want to let go. And when she finally stepped back, her voice cracked as she said, "I should have said something a long time ago." Behind her, I saw my mom stiffen. Denise turned slightly to face the room. Not dramatically, not like she was trying to make a scene, but with a quiet resolve that was somehow louder than anything I'd said. "You all saw it too," she said. "Don't pretend you didn't." The silence in the room shifted. It was no longer the stunned, uncomfortable kind. It was guilty silence. Denise continued, her voice growing steadier. "We let her pretend like she was raising one perfect child in one shadow. We let her talk about Eric like he was her whole world and James like he was a phase she had to tolerate. I remember the birthdays, the school plays, the graduation where James gave the valedictorian speech and Elaine left halfway through because Eric wasn't feeling well. That one hit like a punch to the chest because it was true. I'd stood on a stage, smiling through my speech, pretending not to notice the empty chair in the front row where Mom was supposed to be. She texted me that night, "Sorry I couldn't stay. Eric had a headache." A headache. "You all remember those things?" Denise said, softer now. "You just didn't say anything. None of us did. And James?" She turned back to me, eyes glassy. "I'm sorry for being part of that silence." I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight. A lump swelled that I hadn't expected. For a second, I thought I was going to cry, not out of sadness but relief, like something heavy had been set down after being carried for so long. I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand without it. "I wasn't a good sister to you," Denise said, quieter now. "But maybe I can be better now." I nodded, unable to do much else. Then came the ripple. One of Mom's coworkers, a petite woman with graying hair and a floral scarf, stood up and cleared her throat. "I've worked with Elaine for almost 20 years. And I'm sorry, but I never knew she had a second son." I blinked. "She talked about Eric all the time," the woman continued, fidgeting with her bracelet. "But I don't remember her mentioning James. Not once." A murmur spread through the room. A few more stood, hesitant, awkward, but clearly shaken. One of my older cousins, Evan, glanced at me and then said, "Man, I always wondered why you stopped coming around. Figured you were just the quiet one. I didn't know all that." Mom, meanwhile, had gone completely still. Her expression hadn't changed, but her hands were clenched at her sides. Her smile was gone. And Eric, he looked lost, like someone had pulled a rug from under his entire reality. Because here's the thing about golden children. They only shine as long as everyone keeps the lights focused on them. But once people start turning their heads, start asking why the spotlight is so narrow, that shine starts to look a lot more like projection. Mom finally stepped forward. The calm, collected mask she always wore, it cracked. Not broken, but cracked, like thin ice under too much pressure. "You've made your point," she said to me, each word cold and deliberate. "You've embarrassed me. You've turned my retirement into a spectacle." I looked at her, steady. "No, you did that. The moment you laughed and said I wasn't worth raising." She stared at me for a long time, and I saw it, really saw it. Not just the woman who raised me or didn't. Not the teacher who dedicated her life to shaping young minds. I saw someone who couldn't handle being wrong. Someone who had written a story about her life and refused to accept that she'd left a whole chapter out. Then she said, voice sharp and tight, "Do you think I had a choice? Do you think I had the energy to raise 2 kids after what your father did? I picked the one who made it easier, who didn't question me, who didn't need so much." Felt like a confession and a slap in the face at the same time. You picked the one who let you pretend everything was okay, I replied. That doesn't make it right. It just makes it easy. She looked around, really realizing, that the room was no longer with her. People weren't smiling. They weren't clapping. They weren't even making eye contact. And that, more than anything I said, seemed to rattle her. She turned away, didn't apologize, didn't defend herself. She just walked back to her seat, picked up her glass, and sipped it like it was water. Like if she pretended hard enough, none of this had happened. But it had. It absolutely had. And as I stood there, heart racing, the mic still warm in my hand, I realized I wasn't done yet. There was one more thing they all needed to know. One more part of this story that no one in this room, not even Eric, knew. So I turned back to the crowd. My voice was quiet, almost gentle but clear. There's something else you should know about my dad. And just as I saw Mom's eyes widen in panic, I dropped it. The secret. The one that changed everything. I took a breath. There's something else you should know about my dad, I said, steady now, but sharp as a blade. He didn't just leave on his own. He left because Mom gave him a choice. Eric or me. Gasps rippled through the room. A glass clinked somewhere as someone set it down too fast. All eyes were on me now. Not with pity, not with curiosity, but with the kind of stunned silence that comes when people realize the story they thought they knew was only the surface. Mom's glass stopped halfway to her lips. I looked straight at her. You told him he could stay in Eric's life, but if he wanted to stay in mine, too, you'd make sure he never saw either of us again. You gave him an ultimatum. Pick one son. Just like you did. It was true. I found out by accident 2 years ago. Dad tracked me down after I'd moved across the country. We met up, sat awkwardly at a diner booth. And after the small talk and apologies, after years of pain and confusion, he finally told me. I thought I could be the dad you needed, he said, voice shaking. But your mother, she said if I didn't walk away from you, she'd take Eric and vanish. Change her name. Move states. She said she'd make sure I never saw either of you again. And I knew she meant it. I remember staring at my coffee for a long time, trying to make sense of it, not sure which betrayal hurt more, his or hers. But now, standing in front of a crowd of people who finally saw the truth, it didn't matter. Because now everyone knew. The room was silent. I continued. He chose wrong. And I've told him that. But at least he admitted it. At least he tried to make things right. I turned back to Mom. You never did. You kept the lie going for 30 years. You painted yourself as the hero, the victim, the martyr. And you fed everyone a version of your life where I never existed. She stood up then, slowly, and for the first time in my life she didn't look strong. She didn't look in control. She looked cornered. You think you know everything? She said, trying to sneer, but it came out flat. You think that makes you right? No, I replied, but I'm done pretending you were. Then I turned to Eric. He hadn't moved, hadn't said a word. His mouth was slightly open. His expression stuck between disbelief and something else. Maybe guilt, maybe fear. I didn't care anymore. I don't blame you, Eric, I said loud enough for the whole room. You were a kid. You were just playing the role she gave you. But you're not a kid anymore. You've known the truth for years. And you said nothing. He flinched. He deserved to. You let her erase me, I said. You helped. That was when I saw his expression crack just for a moment. Like something inside him finally clicked. Like maybe he was seeing me, really seeing me, for the first time. But I didn't wait for an apology or a speech or a tearful reconciliation because this wasn't about them anymore. It was about me. I stepped off the little platform, handed the mic to the stunned MC, and walked out the double doors of that community center. No one followed me. No one stopped me. And for the first time in my entire life, I didn't feel like I was walking away from a family. I felt like I was walking towards something. My own damn peace. In the days that followed, things changed. My phone lit up the next morning with texts from people who had been at the party. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years, former neighbors, even a few of Mom's old coworkers. Some were apologizing, others were just shocked. More than one told me I said what everyone had always felt but never had the courage to say. Aunt Denise messaged me privately, said she was proud of me, that she'd be there if I ever needed anything, and she meant it. Eric emailed me. A long, rambling message that started with excuses, detoured into memories, and finally at the bottom said, "I don't know if I can fix this, but I want to try. If you ever want to talk, I'll listen. Maybe I'll reply one day. Maybe not. That part's up to me now." As for Mom, she hasn't reached out. Not once. I've heard from others that she's spinning her version of events, that she says I hijacked her party, made everything about me, twisted the truth. Fine. Let her. Let her live in that little world she built where she gets to be the victim and I'm just the angry, ungrateful son. She doesn't get to define me anymore. Not now. Not ever again. Now on to the next story. Story 8. Before my brother's wedding, I saw my card had paid the full reception bill. He laughed. "You're rich and alone. Consider it your gift." It was my last money. My mom said, "Don't make trouble." I replied angrily, "Only you will have problems." The next morning, they were in chaos. When they finally called me crying, I simply did this. I always knew my brother Brandon was careless with money. He was the kind of guy who'd Venmo someone $30, then spend 50 on drinks without blinking, and by the end of the week be asking our parents for gas money. I used to chalk it up to him being young, figuring he'd grow out of it once life hit him harder. I never thought the first rail hit would land on me. It started about a month and a half before his wedding. He came to me with this whole speech about how the florist raised the price, how the photographer wanted a bigger deposit, how he'd already maxed out his cards. I felt bad. Our parents didn't have much and I was doing okay. I work in tech, live alone, no kids, and yeah, I've been careful. I've been saving since I was 22. I told him I could help with a few things if he needed, but only within reason. He asked if I could just sell the money, and I said, no, I didn't want to mess with that. Instead, I offered to pay directly or let him use a small prepaid card I loaded with $1,000. That was my gift. I even made a joke about it, saying, "This is your wedding present. Enjoy it, but that's it. Don't come back for more." He laughed and promised he wouldn't. Somewhere in that process, I gave him temporary access to one of my bank cards. That was my mistake. I thought I removed it later. Apparently, I didn't. Or maybe he figured out a way to keep it on file. I'll never really know. Fast forward to the night before the wedding. I was alone in my Airbnb. Everyone else was staying at some fancy resort about 20 minutes away, but I needed space. The day had been exhausting. Too many people, too many expectations, and a few backhanded comments from our mom about how nice it was that I was still single and could afford to help. Around 11 p.m., I got a notification from my bank. Large transaction approved. I figured it was fraud. I opened the app and saw it. $9,870. Reception venue paid in full from my account. First, I didn't even panic. Thought it was an error. Then I scrolled through my transaction history. He'd been dipping in for days. Small amounts here and there. $500, then $200, then $1,100, and then the big one. I had $11.33 left in my account. I'd been completely wiped out. Called him. No answer. Called again, nothing. Third time he picked up. Sounded half drunk and completely unbothered. He said something I'll never forget. "You're rich and alone. Consider it your gift." I didn't even respond. I just hung up and stared at my screen. I felt sick. Not even because of the money, though. Yeah, it was everything I had, but because that was how he saw me. Not as his sister, just a wallet. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. I kept going over it in my head. Every stupid time I said yes to him. Every time I covered a bill or gave him a ride or vouched for him, I realized I wasn't just helping him, I was enabling him. Around 7 a.m., I called our mom. I told her exactly what he did. Her response, "Don't make trouble. It's his big day." He was distressed. That's when I snapped. I said, "Only you will have problems." Then I hung up, grabbed my bags, and left. No goodbye, no note, just silence. By the time they realized I was gone, I was halfway back to my apartment. My phone didn't stop buzzing. Missed calls from my dad. Texts from my aunt asking where I was. One from Brandon saying I was being dramatic. I didn't answer any of them. But while driving, I did make one very important call to my bank. I reported the transaction, told them I hadn't authorized the payment. They flagged it immediately. It was under review, pending investigation. The reception hall didn't take long to notice. By the next morning, the calls changed tone. Brandon's fiancée was the first one to cry. He called me in a panic. Said the venue was threatening to cancel unless the money came through again. Apparently, the charge had bounced. They had no backup. No one else had the credit. I didn't say much. I just told her the truth. I'm not paying another cent. You'll figure it out. Then I hung up. That was the moment the cracks started to show and I was just getting started. After I hung up on Brandon's fiancée, I didn't feel angry, not even numb. It was something else, like a switch flipped. For the first time in my life, I truly didn't care what happened to any of them. I turned my phone off and sat on the floor with my laptop. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking. I was just methodically pulling every transaction from the last 2 months. Every dollar Brandon touched. Every random charge he slipped in under my nose. Gas stations, florists, a liquor store, a $600 charge from a suit rental place in Manhattan I'd never even heard of. It all added up. He hadn't just paid for the reception. He'd been bleeding me dry quietly before he took the final blow. He knew exactly what he was doing. I printed out the bank statements, filed a report with my bank to flag the transactions, and started compiling everything. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I wanted to be ready. By nightfall, I turned my phone back on. I had over 40 missed calls. Brandon, our mom, our dad, even my cousin Travis, who I hadn't spoken to in months. The voicemails were all over the place. Brandon had the smug tone at first, said I embarrassed myself and ruined his day, that I was making a big deal over a little family borrowing. Later, the voicemails turned desperate. He said he'd figure out a way to pay me back. Then came the text from Mom. Just come tomorrow. Don't make things worse than they already are. You don't want to carry this bitterness forever. I stared at the screen. I realized she really believed that the worst thing happening in that moment was me being upset. Not the fact that her son drained my life savings. Not that he laughed in my face. Not that they all went along with it. So I sent her one line. You raised a thief. Now you'll watch him sink. Then I blocked her. I didn't go to the wedding. I already knew it was falling apart. Without the venue, they tried to host the ceremony at our cousin Deanna's backyard. Someone posted photos on Facebook later. Plastic chairs, mismatched tablecloths, a DJ standing under a tent with one busted speaker. The kind of wedding you'd throw together in 2 hours with no money and no backup. I didn't feel bad. I didn't even feel satisfied. I just felt done. 2 days after the disaster wedding, things got quiet. Too quiet. That's when I knew they were up to something again. My dad called, said they were working with someone who could help smooth everything out. He didn't say much, but the way he talked made me sick to my stomach, like they'd found a way around me. I asked him directly, "What did you do?" He said, "Not to worry, that it was a temporary solution, that it would help us all in the long run." That word stopped me cold. I ended the call and went straight to my credit report. There was a personal loan application in my name, $15,000, pending approval. I stared at it for a full minute. Not processed yet, but submitted using my information, my social, my address. They had done it. They went behind my back and tried to take out a loan in my name like I was just a funding source they forgot to ask permission from, like I was theirs to use. I called the loan company immediately. I filed a fraud claim and they locked it down. I told them I hadn't applied, that I never authorized anyone. The woman on the phone paused when I told her it was my family. She didn't say anything, but I could hear the judgment in the silence. When I hung up, I opened my laptop again. This time, I wasn't just documenting. I wasn't preparing anymore. I was acting. I called my lawyer, told him everything from the stolen money to the loan attempt. Sent him the screenshots, the statements, the report. He asked if I was sure I wanted to escalate this. I said yes, and I meant it. I told him I wanted a formal claim filed against Brandon for theft and fraud. I also told him I wanted to make sure my name was cleared from anything they touched. I wasn't going down with them. I wasn't going to be the forgotten older sister who quietly took the hit and moved on. They crossed a line I didn't even know I had. And now they were going to learn what happened when I stopped forgiving. 3 days after I opened the fraud case, my phone filled up with missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. I let them sit, let them haunt the notification bar. Eventually, I checked the voicemails. Brandon's voice was there 5 times, each one calmer than the last, like someone coaching him through what to say. Sorry, got out of hand. I'll fix it. I didn't feel anything when I heard it. Just this odd, clear-headed recognition that whatever he said now was for damage control, not for me. Then my mom called. She wanted me to see the bigger picture. She sounded tired, like this was a problem I could tidy up with forgiveness. She mentioned their plans, the pressure on Brandon, how much everyone had put into making this day perfect. She asked if I would drop the claim and handle it privately as family. It was the same request dressed in softer words. I forwarded her message to my lawyer. Within a day, the bank's fraud team called me back. They had reversed the transactions. The $9,900 was back in my account. Relief showed up for a second, then it vanished. The reversal triggered a different fight. The venue, which had already posted confirmations and drafted contracts, flagged the charge as fraudulent. That meant they treated it as a business-level deception and someone had to answer for it. Brandon's tone shifted from smug to thinly panicked. He texted arrangements he swore he'd make. Payment plans, a credit card he'd max out, promises to work extra shifts. All of it mapped out like a script. He even offered to pay me back in small monthly installments for years, $200 a month. The math looked like an insult. Their lawyer sent a certified letter demanding mediation, warning about irreparable harm to family relationships. The phrasing was intentionally dramatic, as if this were a soap opera, and I was the villain. I forwarded that, too. My lawyer responded by filing updated claims that included the loan application attempt and a detailed packet showing the pattern of withdrawals. I didn't go to mediation. I didn't accept visits. I stopped answering the door when my dad knocked. I let them organize their guilt and their threats among themselves while I focused on making sure my name stayed clean. Then they tried a new angle, scare tactics. Someone slid a text across that said I'd regret ruining the family. Another warned that I was chasing legal revenge over a few mistakes. It was obvious who fed them those lines. It was also obvious who had been treated like a cash machine for months. That's when I stopped wanting apologies. I stopped wanting "we'll fix it." I started wanting consequences that matched what they'd done. I wanted my life back, not performative remorse. I wanted them to feel the fallout of trusting that their golden son could take whatever he wanted and get away with it. So I kept going. I kept sending everything to my lawyer. I kept the fraud reports open. I let them watch the legal machinery move slowly but inevitably toward them. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself. A small, steady calm. They had turned me into a line item on a spreadsheet. I was rewriting that spreadsheet. After the mediation letter and the stalled loan, I thought they might fold. I was wrong. A week later, my lawyer called me with something that made my stomach drop again. There were new documents, invoices, a credit agreement, even a notary stamp, all tied to transactions that showed up after the bank reversed the reception payment. They weren't just desperate, they were reckless. Someone had used my name to set up temporary lines of credit and short-term merchant accounts. Small businesses had been built in my name for catering, rentals, even a photographer I'd never heard of. Most of it hadn't gone through completely, but a few payments had processed. Charges that would reflect on my credit if I didn't catch them now. I asked who did it. My lawyer said there were traces pointing to a third party, a fixer someone in the family knew, a guy who helped people with paperwork. My dad's name came up in one exchange. So did Brandon's. My mother's voice on a recorded call we'd obtained through Discovery sounded oddly clipped when she asked the fixer if Katie would really notice. That call was short because the fixer didn't expect me to go looking. It was the sort of thing that changes how you think of people you grew up with. Not a single person in my family called to ask if I was okay while this was happening. They called the fixer. When I confronted my dad over the phone, he tried to justify it. Said the wedding was falling apart. Said we had to do something. Said he'd never actually signed anything. He begged me not to drag everyone into court. He said our grandparents wouldn't understand. He asked if we could handle it quietly like adults. I told him no. I told him I wanted everything on record. A few days later, the fixer realized I wasn't bluffing. He reached out with a message that read like a warning. If I pushed, he could make sure the paperwork disappeared. He hinted at ways the case could be settled without lawyers. The message was thinly veiled extortion. I forwarded it to my lawyer and to the police. That's when things went nuclear. Brandon lost his job. His employer told him there were concerns about financial misconduct related to client accounts. Nothing criminal on paper yet, but enough that his manager put him on leave pending an internal audit. He called me, voice small, offering to sign over a car. Anything to settle. I told him to speak to his lawyer. He hung up. My parents started to fracture in a way I hadn't expected. They'd always been a united front when it came to covering for him, but the fixer's extortion left them exposed. My mom turned to my dad and said she didn't know what he was thinking. My dad started staying out late, answering calls in the garage. I could hear the way their stories unraveled when emails came in. Subpoenas, notices, questions from people who wanted proof. I could have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow. Their desperation made them do things that stacked consequences on top of consequences. The fixer, sensing danger, vanished. The police put resources onto the attempted loan and the forged accounts. My lawyer filed for emergency relief to make sure my credit was clean and to preserve evidence. Then one of Brandon's friends, the one who had been their small-time planner, slipped and told me something wrong. Brandon panicked the day before the reception and blurted out he had already used Katie's card. And then the friend suggested the fixer could help with making it look like Katie tried to help. That friend didn't realize I already had everything. He didn't know I'd been building a map. At night, when the phone finally stopped ringing, I found myself scrolling through old photos of us as kids. Not because I missed them, but because I wanted to understand how easily people lie to themselves. How one choice, a wedding pushed into fantasy by a son who felt entitled, could make a whole family act like criminals. They came to me again, this time humbler. My mom showed up at my apartment with a bouquet and a speech she'd practiced, telling me they were sorry, that they had been wrong, that they'd fix it all. My door was closed. She left and texted that she'd be in touch. I filed more motions. I asked for asset freezes where I could. I wanted the paperwork to show the trail of decisions, of calls, of the fixer's messages, of the loan applications. I wanted judges to see that this wasn't a family in crisis. It was a coordinated attempt to treat me like an ATM. That week, the pattern emerged clear as day. The more they tried to cover it, the worse it got. And every time they lied, they created something new they had to lie about. They were living in a house of mirrors, and they built it themselves. About 2 weeks after I filed the full claim, things shifted fast. My lawyer called to tell me the DA's office had officially opened a case against Brandon for identity theft and fraud. It was no longer just civil. It was potentially criminal. What pushed it over the line was a paper trail so sloppy it was insulting. The fake loan application, the catering invoices under my name, the altered signatures, all of it tied directly to my stolen identity. The irony? They had gotten greedy and careless. That fixer Brandon used had submitted some of the fraudulent docs through a Gmail address with his full name in it. He tried to act like some backroom genius, but the idiot left metadata on PDFs and timestamps that placed him and Brandon at the same address when it all went through. I forwarded the last of my documentation to the investigator. It was over 60 pages. Every text, every email, every transaction. There was no way out of it now. Brandon finally cracked when the police showed up at his apartment. They didn't arrest him, but they did question him, and apparently he hadn't seen it coming. He called me late that night from a number I didn't recognize. I picked up because by that point, curiosity outweighed everything. He was crying. Not yelling, not defending himself, just broken. He said he didn't mean for it to get that far. That he panicked, that he was trying to fix the wedding, that the payments started small. But then the venue said they needed the full amount, and he didn't know what else to do. He begged me not to press charges. He told me his wife was threatening to leave him, that she had moved in with her parents temporarily, that their joint bank account had been frozen after my fraud report triggered a secondary investigation from the venue's legal team. He kept saying it was all just a mistake, that he was sorry. I listened to the whole thing, then told him what I told the bank, the DA, the venue, and my lawyer. I wasn't dropping anything. I wanted the money repaid, my name cleared, and the record set straight. Period. If he needed to explain himself, he could do it to a judge. He didn't argue. He just said, "Okay," and hung up. That was the moment I knew he finally understood what he had done. Not because I'd convinced him, but because the damage had finally reached him, and he couldn't hide from it anymore. A week later, my parents showed up at my apartment. I didn't let them in, but I opened the door far enough to see how this was breaking them, too. My mom was holding a small wrapped box. My dad didn't say anything. My mom said they wanted to apologize in person. She said they didn't know the loan was real, that they thought Brandon was just buying time, that they didn't want to hurt me. Then she said something that hit me harder than I expected. "We thought you'd get over it like always." Like always, he was right. I had always brushed it off. The birthday money he borrowed and never returned. The vacation I didn't take so I could help with his tuition gap. The family dinners where they looked at me like I was lucky to be childless and successful, like that meant I owed them something. I told her I wasn't angry anymore. I just couldn't be their daughter while they kept pretending this wasn't real. Then I closed the door. That week, my lawyer filed the final civil suit. Brandon was the primary defendant. My parents were named for attempted complicity and enabling identity fraud. They were served the next day. I was told my dad didn't even open the envelope at first. He just left it sitting on the table like ignoring it would make it disappear. But it didn't. Nothing did. Brandon lost his job officially. His employer cut ties quietly, citing internal issues. His wife posted vague statements on Facebook about trust being broken and people ruining their own lives. The venue filed its own separate claim against him for contract fraud, and their lawyer made it clear they weren't settling out of court. Meanwhile, my parents' bank accounts were put under review due to multiple flag transactions tied to the fixer, who had vanished entirely. They were left with legal fees, damaged credit, and a very expensive reminder that family loyalty doesn't exempt you from consequences. My name was cleared. My bank balance restored. My credit repaired. I didn't forgive them. I didn't need to. Forgiveness implies I'd ever consider going back. But I wasn't angry anymore. Not because I healed, but because I won. I had protected what they thought they could take. I stayed standing while they collapsed under the weight of their own lies. They thought I'd break. I just watched them fall. 3 months after I filed the lawsuit, I sat in the back of a small courtroom across from my brother. Brandon looked like a shell of himself. No suit, no wedding ring, just a cheap blazer and a stack of papers he didn't even glance at. His lawyer kept whispering in his ear, trying to steer the conversation, but Brandon wouldn't lift his eyes off the table. My lawyer had everything prepared. Bank statements, fraudulent documents, screenshots of text messages, the forged loan application, and the emails tied to the fixer. It wasn't a debate. It was just a matter of how much he owed and how long he'd be paying for it. They tried to talk about emotional pressure and family tensions and even attempted to float the idea that I had allowed access to the accounts and implicitly gave consent. The judge shut that down immediately. The evidence was too clean, too direct. In the end, Brandon was ordered to repay the full $9,900 with interest plus all of my legal fees. The judgment would sit on his record until it was paid off in full, and if he missed even one payment, it would escalate further. But that wasn't even the part that got to him. The judge added a condition. A written apology formally submitted to the court and to me, not for my benefit, but because the law saw what he did as personal, targeted, and intentional. That apology would sit in a file, a permanent note that he had knowingly stolen from his own sister. My parents weren't at the hearing. They didn't even call afterward. I found out from a friend of theirs that they'd hired a separate attorney just to deal with the potential fallout from their involvement. Apparently, after their names appeared on a few of the flag documents, the bank launched an internal review on multiple accounts tied to them. They'd refinanced their home quietly, not because they wanted to help Brandon, but because they were trying to protect what little was left in their name. They didn't even try to talk to me anymore. Not a text, not a voicemail, not a single explanation. And I was fine with that. After the case closed, I moved out of my apartment, packed my things, hired movers, and got a place across town. I got new cards, new passwords, changed my number, and started fresh. I gave no forwarding address. I didn't tell a soul outside of work. For the first time in over a year, I felt untangled from them. 1 week later, while I was in Portland for a solo trip, I got a call from a Washington state number. I let it go to voicemail. Something told me it wasn't done yet. It was Brandon's wife. She sounded exhausted, quiet, said she was sorry for bothering me, but that she needed to say something. She said she was leaving Brandon, that she hadn't known everything until after the hearing, that he had told her the situation was under control, that I was just being difficult, that the money had already been paid back and I was just doing it to make a point. She said it wasn't until she saw the full court filing, the records, the forged application, the fixer, that she realized what he actually was. He said she felt sick. She said she wished she had listened to me sooner. I didn't call back. It wasn't personal. I just didn't see the point. That chapter was closed. She hadn't stolen from me. She hadn't signed my name or called me dramatic or asked me to let it go for family. She was just the last person still hoping there was something salvageable in that mess. I didn't feel bitter. I didn't feel vengeful. I felt free. My money was returned. My credit was cleared. The judgment was public. Brandon was unemployed. His marriage was unraveling. And my parents were left hiding in the quiet aftermath of a mess they helped make me. I got out clean. I got to start over on my own terms. And I left them with exactly what they gave me. Silence. Let them dig through the ashes. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.